Chapter 918. Don't say that, Bien Qing. No matter what, you saved my life. Niu Ruowan closed his eyes. It was as if he was recalling the last moment of the operation to decapitate the commander-in-chief. At that time, 10 servants carried out the beheading operation. The reason why Nuwakamaru and Musasobo Benkei survived was entirely because Musasobo Benkei, who was Nuwakamaru's minister, saved Nuwakamaru from being killed by the beasts. Musasobo Benkei pulled Nuwakamaru into the Euphrates River. However, there were also mass-produced beasts in the river, the winged mermaid Kuru. Musasobo Benkei and Nuwakamaru were almost killed by the winged mermaids. Fortunately, Musasobo Benkei activated his noble phantasm in time and temporarily affected the spirit of the winged mermaids. Musasobo Benkei and Nuwakamaru were able to escape, but both of them were seriously injured. It could only be said that it was fate. Although both of them were seriously injured, they were lucky not to die. By coincidence, both of them drifted to the North Wall. Both the Euphrates River and the Tigris River flowed through the North Wall. In the past, the Uruk did not defend these two rivers, causing a large number of winged mermaids to appear from the river and cause damage to the surrounding area. After that, according to Gilgamesh's plan, people set up a similar gate at the position of the two rivers passing through the North Wall. The effect of the gate was simple. Beasts couldn't swim through, and the river flowed normally. Since demonic beasts couldn't swim past the barrier, the servants naturally couldn't swim past it. Nyoruoru and Musashi Benkei were blocked outside the barrier. They happened to be discovered by the daily maintenance inspection personnel and were rescued. They were the only two servants who returned to Uruk alive. If Musasobo Benkei didn't pull Nuwakamaru into the river at that time, perhaps both of them would be buried in different groups of beasts like the other 8 servants who participated in the beheading operation. No, Lord Nyoruo Chiaching of Musashigeru seemed to have something else he wanted to hide as he stammered. However, before Musasobo Benkei finished hesitating, on the wall of the stronghold, a soldier with sharp eyes suddenly saw a large cloud of dust on the plain in front of them. What's that? Many of the soldiers climbed to the top of the stronghold's walls to take a look. Even Nyoruowaru did not listen to the hesitant words of Takashige Kei. Instead, he jumped onto the battlements of the tower and squatted down. Because of his clothes, Nyoruowaru's seductive figure looked in the direction where the soldiers were looking. Nuwakamaru, whose eyesight was much better than many soldiers, instantly saw what was coming toward them along with the dust. That's beasts. Thousands or even more red-furred, a god who could make Enkidu treat her with respect couldn't possibly be an evil
charging
god.
towards
It will
like
definitely report the general
location.
It was a rather impactful. The huge garrulous
the mass-produced
tone suddenly changed.
It's
this made Wumi
jump,
jump,
and
he froze. He instantly felt this voice made a Reshtigal fall. He could only say that it was all thanks to King. However, because of its body, shyness and mass, it didn't fall directly. They had predicted Reshtigal, who realized that something was wrong. Set up the strong immediately close to herself. Otherwise,
Moreover,
him,
so many
snakes rushing. My underworld quickly climbed up the cliff. I will send the garrulous spirit. Definitely, really return to the northern. Once you're done, they would definitely know about the situation. Leave immediately. Di Qing, as soon as in a situation where he was unable to report the garrulous spirit, the opponent's blood red several magical beasts melted into the rock. Nuwakamaru immediately jumped down from a high platform and went to Musasobo. Although Chapter 928 that the goddess sure enough Nuwakamaru's base camp. Although Musasobo was only guessing, she couldn't believe a little hesitant. It was only a few nights ago that she, as for the reason why Nuwakamaru, he was sure that Ereshkigal represented on the side to walk on the ground. But however, now that Ereshkigal used it, deviated, it was entirely because the idea of using she was an enemy stronger walk on the ground. However, this was as long as her thought after saying so much. Are you still much? This could be considered another breakthrough. Although she didn't know physical fitness was obvious that Ereshkigal, but the servants were still. If the goddess of the actions were also defective, therefore, it was the best choice. Even if it wasn't serving Uruk to report, then the other goddesses alliance would today I will tell you that my underworld is already Gilgamesh in this way. Humans could also deal with the goddess of Warcraft. Come together, capture all the souls of humans. Although one less servant may lead to a deeper better not kingdom of the dead. filled with better to be able to bring in other words to investigate your protecting humans. And this was a war first. A war between Word stunned Ereshkigal and the overall situation. Huge. If there were any other transformed Musasobo Benkei could immediately set a spirit. He did not need anything like persons. The legs of service were the best means of transportation. It stopped although Ereshkigal seemed to be waiting. I'm willing to believe. Let's go. Ereshkigal had been in the underworld, although he was born felt a little better treated. He felt a little sorry for his durability. She didn't have much contact with the outside. Musasobo Benkei could run because all the way to the position over there. Ereshkigal, after looking at Musasobo Benkei fighting for God, followed. Also, she had been diligently taking care. After all, of the underworld, everyone still had a god-like way he came. Let these garrulous restricted powerful wasn't slow. Nawakamaru was able to keep up. Humans were born and soon arrived. Minamoto Yasha. It was the same for God. She was a general, a god who was set up empty since she was didn't have much contact. It was chains wrapped around the spear. Seemed like a god who would harm and surrounded this place. Although there were only a few who never met, the soldiers still made a definite. Women believed that the soldiers began to defend, diligently taking soldiers set up spears and some were even pulled out. Wouldn't become the chains around the spear cages were also violently broken. Most importantly, scattered. Everyone was waiting for the center of the stone Enkidu's body. There was a pit ready to attack because Enkidu treated her. Anyone could see that what was originally buried and was ready to attack must be Enkidu. She was ready to jump down when the beast approached. As expected, use the Uruk Enkidu, your body cast her noble phantasm. As if receiving instructions can cross the golden light spots, there must be a commander commanding woman's body. A silver chain appeared and wrapped around magic arms and waist, and tried to look at the back of the army of beasts. The chains clanged against each other, as if a lion-headed man was walking up the demonic plane under the cover of the smoke. Or did Gidea's minions do this? Nawakamaru. The traces left behind, and her face was the one who took away. Since she had found the commander of the beasts, wasn't an elegant person. What Nawakamaru to be able to leave behind was to take the head of the commander. It was either a monster she was not afraid of rationality or one of with so many beasts around her, one of the 70 spring demons. Even if she could not kill the commander after all, beasts, from the original of Enkidu, she was confident that she would not be forced to retreat. Enkidu's body was stolen. The other were not as definitely not on the side of thought. Amidst this horde of magical beasts, Wuming rejected three-headed snakes that were as thick as small pythons. Did it herself. One Master, why are you so sure? At this time, along by Wuming's head lit up, charged the seemingly ordinary dragon, gradually headpiece, the entire horde of magical beasts, because the timeline does magical beasts. Wuming casually answered Kalis, and then explained to her in detail. Chapter the demonic beasts were produced by the goddess of demonic beasts. There are so many Enkidu obviously appeared together because the group of demonic beasts was approaching. So it was unlikely many soldiers saw the red three-headed snake. The demon god pillars could appear in various as early as 3 months ago, and Gilgamesh released a notice about making those demonic beasts become, including the names, physical characteristics. It seemed like they traveled through degree of difficulty. But if observed carefully, and other those eras were so everyone knew the names of these demonic beasts. The demon god pillars were passed. It could be said that it caused generation to generation. This kind of mass-produced a certain Musumafu, they would awaken extremely difficult to deal with. Especially in this kind of offensive battle, because when I was in Atlas Courtyard, could easily break through the human defense at that time through the gaps of the guns and cause damage to the Leonardo da Vinci were brought into Atlas Courtyard because the number of Musumafu was very small before. When its impact was not as big as other demonic and Leonardo da Vinci left Atlas Courtyard. So far, Sherlock Holmes side had not already deduced that defensive measures against it. Had a conversation with shrink in the gap of the guns to the extent. The reason why Wuming appeared behind Gadotsi, however, these was because Wuming had just come out of Atlas Courtyard. Still get through. After all, as the other party constantly evolving. Their size used a three-pointed Hermes. The gap of the guns could not be too small, or it would affect the performance of the guns. At that time, Kalis fell into the box world with just happened to be able to get through. So it was normal that she didn't know so many things. More than one demonic beast, there would be no need. Nawakamaru could not help. Kalis' database is because every demonic beast had a prototype brain. Every mass-produced demonic beast would only listen to the orders of the prototype. If Kalis had followed Wuming the whole time, unless the prototype ability, there would be no problem demonic beast questions through every little thing. Since so many mass-produced, unfortunately, Kalis wasn't by Wuming's side. That is to say, the prototype Musumafu could only ask one of the demonic beast commanders. It's just a coincidence that you weren't here. If it was only jealous, Yuger, my exclusive magic costume could deal with is lapis and even have the opportunity to kill it. During
At
the
that
beheading
moment,
operation,
Tallis didn't
she
speak anymore,
Musasobo
shy,
Benkei,
but
and
another
magic
servant
costume.
were responsible for
It could
the
only be
demonic
said
beast
that it was
commander
indeed
was
the
the
work of
prototype
Gemstone
Yugger.
Master.
Unfortunately,
And the emotional
the
system
strength
was
of the
also at the
prototype
peak of
Yugger
its
was
level.
beyond their
In short,
expectations,
including
and the
Winterwood
other
City,
servant
the
died
first 7
directly.
singularities were
If it were
all
not for
created by a
Musasobo
technique called the
Benkei
Demon God Pillar
risking his
that was
life
hidden
to
in the
save
human
her,
genes
Nuwakamaru
and
would
passed down
definitely
to a fixed
die under the
age.
claws and fangs of the Yugger.
In this year,
Nuwakamaru's mission
2655
failed.
BC,
Before
the
Nuwakamaru
demon god
said in
pillar
front of the
couldn't have
soldiers
appeared
to
no
make
matter
up for the
what.
mistakes.
So this
referring to the
singularity
mistakes
could
of the
only be
mission
handled
failure.
by Gidia.
Moreover,
personally,
escaping
although
death was
Gidia
not without
could
any
also
benefits.
teleport the demon
At
god
least
pillar
after
to
the
this
last
singularity.
test,
Wumi's
Nuwakamaru had
intuition
figured
told
out
him
the
that this
strength of the
singularity
demonic beast
was
commander
set up by Gidia
prototype
without
Yugger.
anyone
Even if
else's
Yugger
help.
was a mythical
Then,
beast,
in other words,
it was not out of the
body
category of
might be
living
the real
creatures.
Enkidu.
So as long as
The
the head
silver
of the
chain on
prototype Yugger
Wuming's
was cut
hand
off,
couldn't
the
help
prototype
but
Yugger
shake,
would
as if it was
definitely
angry
die.
that its body was being
Nuwakamaru,
used by the enemy,
who was holding
gently
Bolu,
pacifying
was
the
sure that the
restless
mass-produced
silver chain.
Yugger demonic
Wuming
beasts
fell
were
into
used
deep
as a
thought
springboard
as he recalled
to
the
cast
past.
his noble phantasm.
No wonder that
After being
Enkidu
strengthened
had a
by the
strange
noble
reaction when it
phantasm.
saw me.
If Bolu's
Perhaps
attack hit the
Enkidu's
neck
body
of the prototype
affected
Yugger,
the
it
unknown
would definitely
soul
be
within.
cut off.
At that moment,
Therefore,
Wuming
when
revealed a
Nuwakamaru
smile.
saw that the opponent's demonic
since it's the
beast
real
commander
Enkidu
was
in a
only
certain
Yugger,
sense,
he was
it's
so
very
happy that he
advantageous
almost
for
became
us.
evil.
Because
However,
the only
this
god
time,
that Enkidu
the opponent
believed
did
in
not have
and
one
served
demonic
was the
beast
Uruk
commander, but
Hyunryong,
two.
which
Although
was
the
also
prototype
Wuming himself.
Musumafu was nowhere to be seen, the other party must be lying in ambush
Chapter
somewhere.
9,
Sure
29.
enough, the beheading
After
operation
Wuming
finished,
made the demonic
investigating
beast commanders
Enkidu.
have a
He
sense
came
of
to the
crisis.
surface from the underworld
As a result,
through the ground.
two
that was
demonic
blown
beast
up by
commanders
Ishtar.
are now acting
Putting the
together.
fake Enkidu aside,
Nuwakamaru
Gadotsi
was rather melancholy
Matthew
as he pondered,
and the others
at
were
present,
still on the surface.
They could not
Although
retreat,
Merlin was there,
and they could not block
Gadotsi and
the
Matthew
attack.
wouldn't go
Looking
to the
at the
underworld
soldiers
to find
around
him who had
they
lost their
definitely
morale.
wouldn't leave.
Nuwakamaru
Maybe they were still
made a
waiting
decision.
for him nearby.
Since they could not
no matter
advance
what,
he had to go up
retreat,
and say
they
hello,
might as well cut
and
off
then go back
all
to
means
Uruk.
of retreat.
And Wuming
Even
hadn't
if there's
gone
another
back to
demonic
Uruk since
beast
he
commander
returned
to
hiding in the
Mesopotamia.
dark. It would be good to report to
Gilgamesh
Gilgamesh
about
about
Enkidu.
Nuwakamaru
Standing at the edge
shouted
of the collapsed
angrily
ground
and jumped down.
Wuming
from
looked back
stronghold.
at the huge
She had
crater
decided to
behind
take
him
the
and
initiative.
nodded.
Master
This way,
Nuwakamaru,
the demonic
the soldiers
beast
looked
could
at
be prevented from
Nuwakamaru's
coming
figure
here,
and
it was an
not
unexpected
help but worry.
surprise.
Retreat
After all,
immediately.
the surrounding area had
It's useless to
collapsed,
stay here,
and the demonic
return
beast
to
couldn't
Uruk
choose
as
to
soon
enter
as
the
possible
underworld
to get
and then
reinforcements.
climb up.
I'll
That
hold
was
the
equivalent
opponent back.
to provoking
Nuwakamaru did
irrational,
not even turn his
and they would
head
definitely
as
be
he finished
killed.
speaking
While
and
Wuming was
directly
talking
rushed. The
towards
girl's
the
excited
demonic
voice
beast.
came from behind
The
him.
soldiers on the
Assassin
stronghold looked at
Wuming
each
turned
other,
his head,
although
and saw
Nuwakamaru
Gadotsi
said
running
so.
while waving at him.
They still could not
and
make up
Matthew
their
was
minds.
behind her with a
If
panicked
it was only
face.
Yugger,
For a
they could
moment,
still hold on for a
Matthew,
while.
however,
a demi-servant,
Yugger was
couldn't
entangled
catch up with
Gadotsi,
Gadotsi,
who was
Once
an
Yugger
ordinary
brought
human.
Musumafu
Senpai,
close
please
to the
slow down.
stronghold.
When
Those
she was close to
Musumafu
Musumafu,
would
Gadotsi
definitely squeeze
suddenly
through the gaps
flew
between the
toward
weapons.
Wuming. There was no
Wuming
need to
quickly
think about
opened
it.
his hands,
It definitely
took a few
cannot
steps
stop
forward,
and
however,
caught Gadotsi.
he couldn't just become a
Assassin,
deserter
and
Are
abandon
you okay?
Nyoruwan. Gadotsi
For a
looked
moment,
worried. The soldiers
However,
did not know what to do.
Wuming knocked Gadotsi's
However,
little
the
head.
attentive soldiers
If you're so
discovered a
impatient,
problem. I'll be in
something's
trouble.
not right.
Senior, based on the time it took for us to see the demonic
Matthew,
beasts, who came
the
to the
demonic
two of them,
beast
should
was
have already
panting
heavily
rushed
and
over
looked
at this
quite
distance.
uncomfortable.
Because he was
attentive
too
soldiers
anxious to
raised
catch up
their
with
doubts.
Gadotsi.
The soldiers
Matthew
began to look around,
didn't have much time
and
to catch
discovered
his
that the
breath.
demonic beast
Look
had
at you,
not
Matthew.
rushed over
Don't
even
do this
after
again.
a long time.
Wuming
There was no
immediately
change
let
in the
go
distance
of
at all.
Gadotsi.
Ever since they
and went to
discovered
Matthew's back
Musumafu,
to rub Matthew's
the soldiers
back.
lost their
He
morale
then injected his
and did
mana
not
into
observe the
Matthew's
enemy
body to
situation.
relieve
That was why they
Matthew's
did not
fatigue.
discover anything.
I'm sorry, Matthew.
Now that they
I was
observed
too
again,
anxious.
the soldiers
Gadotsi
really
also
did
came over to
discover something
apologize to
different.
Matthew.
In the middle
When
of the
she found out that
a
Wuming's
white-haired
spirit base
man
was
holding a
nearby,
magic staff
she immediately
appeared out of
ran
nowhere
over
and stood
It's-
there.
It's okay.
Is that the court magician,
Senior,
Lord
I-
Merlin? I understand that you're worried
Some of the
about
soldiers
Vi.
had seen Merlin
Senior
before,
Villa,
and
although he was
immediately
relieved,
recognized
Matthew
the
was still
strange
panting
looking
heavily.
Merlin.
Could it be
seemed
that
that he
Lord
needed a
Merlin
little
is
rest.
helping us?
That must
Tachika,
be it. You should calm
Otherwise,
down in the future.
why would the demonic
A
beast
demonic
seem to be
beast
walking
commander
on the spot?
escaped?
If
It
it
had
had
to be said that when humans
it will be
face a
troublesome
crisis,
if it
there would
ambushes
be a
you
moment
halfway.
when their minds
Gadotsi
would
didn't
become
care about
emotional.
anything just now.
However, after
When
receiving the
humans
news
escaped
that
from a
Wumi
crisis
appeared
and calmed
here,
down,
she
their
directly
minds
ran
would also
over.
become clear.
Matthew was also
in an
worried
instant.
about Gadotsi's
Indeed.
safety.
Merlin
So
had
he was out
cast
of breath
an illusion
and
spell
followed her
and successfully
Don't worry
stopped
about
the
that.
demonic beast.
The demonic beast
However,
commander
it
has
could only
left.
last for a while.
A voice came from
Nawakamu,
behind Wumi,
who had
Wumi
rushed
turned
out,
his head and
also
saw that it
saw
was
Merlin's
Ishtar.
figure.
You're
However,
okay?
since
That's
she had
great.
already rushed out, there was no
Wumi's
reason
tone
for
was
her to
rather
return.
flat as he
Therefore,
nodded. Ishtar
Nawakamu
knew very
rushed
well
to
what
Merlin's
Wumi
side
meant
and
by
one
nothing
breath.
happened. Warming
Merlin,
meant that
why are you
Ishtar
here?
was not ambushed by the demonic
was a little
beast
excited.
commander.
It seemed
However,
that the Uruk's
knowing
reinforcements
was one
had arrived.
thing. But
I just happened
Wuming's
to pass
perfunctory
by.
attitude
The
made
Uruk side
Ishtar
still
quite
doesn't know the
unhappy.
situation here.
You bastard.
Merlin,
I was
who
worried
saw
that
Nuwakamar's
Ereshkigal would
expectation,
imprison you and
gave her a
underworld.
merciless blow.
And you're actually
Are
looking
you the only
forward
one
to
who
something
came here?
happening to me? Is this too
At that
dangerous?
moment,
Ishtar was like an
Nuwakamaru was
angry
startled.
cat.
If
staring
Merlin's illusion
fiercely
spell
at
was
Wuming.
broken,
Miss Ishtar
including
was
Merlin,
indeed ambushed
Nuwakamaru,
by Musumaf
and many
nearby.
soldiers would become
But because we
food
were all
for the demonic
stationed
beasts.
not far away.
For example, now,
nothing happened
bang,
to Ishtar.
the sound of glass
Matthew,
breaking
who
was
had
heard.
recovered his breath.
The demonic beast
also
began their
to
official
explain.
charge as the light.
Who would have
purple
thought that
fog
guy was
dispersed.
actually hiding
I took the
underground?
initiative to
It actually
break
managed
the
to
illusion
hide
spell.
such a huge
Merlin
thing.
explained the situation
Ishtar became
without
irritated
waiting
at
for
the thought of
Nuwakamaru
this.
to ask.
It could be said that if
Lord
it weren't
Merlin,
for Wuming's reminder,
however,
she
while
would have been eaten
Nuwakamaru
by
was
Musumaf
surprised
by now.
Merlin
Devouring a
immediately
god
spoke
would
again.
bring about
Don't worry,
considerable growth
I didn't say that I
for a
came
demonic
alone.
beast.
Merlin smiled.
It was the same reason
and then pointed
why
to
you
the
let him
sky.
wanted to devour
Nuwakamaru
me.
looked up.
It was no wonder that
subconsciously
Musumaf
and found that
would
Ishtar
hide
was
and
rising
wait
like a
and
sinister
Galta
viper.
Kaigel he.
Sure enough,
Mountain shakes
the demonic
star's
beast
salary.
commander isn't all brainless. After all,
Chapter
those
920.
brainless
The
demonic
rising
beast
golden
commanders
star
were most
was like a
likely dead,
falling meteor,
and the remaining
crashing
ones were probably
straight
into the
some
center
meticulous
of a horde of
fellows.
monsters.
Wuming couldn't
Boom.
help but
The
become
impact of the
serious.
golden star directly
sorry,
penetrated
Ishtar.
the ground.
It's my mistake.
As if it had been blasted
I should have
by
let you leave
countless
with me.
TNT.
Wuming really
The
didn't
rocks and
expect
soil
that
were instantly
Musumaf
burned
would
in
actually
a black
ambush you.
powder by the flames.
The reason why he said
and then
demonic
evaporated by the
beasts
high
might
temperature of the
ambush
explosion
was just to
At
scare
the same
Ishtar
time,
and Gadotsi.
countless monsters
After
were
all,
also affected.
those who
If
escaped
someone could
in
see from the center
such
of
a
the
situation
explosion,
would
they would
definitely
see that the
choose to leave.
monsters were
In the
instantly
end,
vaporized by the
Musumaf actually
flames
chose to
and high
ambush them.
temperature.
It can only be
The
said that
mass-produced Yudra was still
Musumaf
fine.
was bold enough.
At least some of its
If
limbs were
Wuming
left,
and Ishtar
such as its
were to
teeth
come out
and
together
skull with a
and if Wuming
trace
were to
of
find
magic
out,
power.
Musumaf
The
would
mass-produced
definitely follow in his
Musumafu,
footsteps today,
which was
much
Wuming
smaller
couldn't
than
let the
Yudra,
tiger return to
suffered.
the mountain.
Its
no
entire
matter what.
body was engulfed
Wuming
by
really
the high
regretted that he
temperature of
didn't
the
let
explosion,
Ishtar, and the
stay
flames had
a little
completely
longer.
melted the
Wuming's
slender
regretful
bones of the
expression in
mass-produced
Ishtar's
Musumafu
eyes
turned into
The
self-blame
huge
for her
explosion
danger,
caused the ground
which made
to
Ishtar
collapse.
didn't know
Although
what to
it was
say for a
not
while.
as strong
Wuming
as
apologizing
Wuming's beam
to
of light
Ishtar
that
in
affected
such a
the
serious
entire
way
Mesopotamia
was really
the
rare
entire
for Ishtar.
northeastern region
It could be said
was
that it
still
was
affected.
basically impossible
The defensive barrier
for
that
such
was
a
set up
situation
here
to happen.
shook because
The
of
relationship
huge
between the two was
explosion.
actually not
as
that
it was only
bad,
temporary.
but basically
its quality
every
was
time
not
they
very
met,
good.
they would have
At
to
this
mock
moment,
and ridicule
it was in a
each other.
state of
It had
near
almost become a
collapse.
habit.
The
Ishtar
soldiers
was
had
also
all
affected by the
evacuated
girl's
from the
body
barrier.
this time,
If
as
it
a
didn't die in the
pseudo-servant.
process of
So
fighting
she
with the
didn't
magical
quarrel
beast,
with
but
Wuming.
was crushed to death
However,
by the building.
Wuming
It would
wasn't
be
a
really
pseudo-servant.
embarrassing.
And he
But
wasn't
even if they were
affected
far
by it.
away from the barrier,
How could he apologize?
the soldiers
so
still found
easily?
out who had
This made
released
Ishtar
such a
feel quite
terrifying
awkward.
golden star.
At the moment,
In Mesopotamia,
Ishtar also began
when
to
the golden
speak
star was
hesitantly.
mentioned, Ishtar would definitely be thought of.
As expected,
It's
this
Lady
is
Ishtar.
not your fault. After all,
Lady Ishtar,
you also told
the
me
mistress
if I
of
could
the
come out with
heavens,
you, I would
as
definitely
expected of the
not let
goddess.
Musumafu
She's still
escape.
on our side.
I really missed a
Long
great
live Lady
opportunity
Ishtar.
to kill
Oh,
another demonic
Ishtar,
beast commander
who was flying in the sky
Wuming
beside
clenched his
my
left
Anna,
fist,
heard
and
the
hammered his
soldiers'
right
cheers
hand,
and praises
directly
for her.
interrupted
Her originally
Ishtar's
rather
speech,
angry mood
and his expression
was now
became
relieved.
even more
Ishtar
regretful.
was
As the
dissatisfied
saying goes,
and even
the
angry
more you
that
think about
Wuming
it,
had
the
used his
angrier you
authority
get,
and word
the more you
games
take a
to
step
force
back,
contract with her.
the more you think
After
about it.
following
Wuming's current
orders
state
to come
was
here,
more or less the
Ishtar's
same.
anger.
However,
along with the
Wuming's
huge amount
words
of
made
magic
Ishtar,
power that
Gadotsi,
Wuming had transferred
and
to
Matthew
her,
stunned
and
on the
most of the
spot.
magic
The
power
meaning
in
of
her body
Wuming's words
were channeled
was
into
already
her noble
very
orifice.
obvious.
She
wasn't
released
worried
it
about
with
Ishtar,
resentment
but he
towards the
regretted
monsters.
missing the opportunity
This made
to kill
Ishtar's
the demonic
noble
beast
artifact
commander
even more
Gadotsi
terrifying.
and
At
Matthew
the same
couldn't
time,
help but
Ishtar was
swallow their
relieved,
saliva,
relieving
silently
her
looking
anger
at
from
Ishtar
falling
with lowered her
into
head
Wuming's
and
trap.
exuded a
However,
terrifying aura.
the soldiers thought
Sure
that
enough,
Ishtar came to help
Ishtar
them
also
because she
lived up to
saw the
everyone's
monsters
expectations,
attacking,
and they
shouted
all
out
praised
what
Ishtar.
Gadotsi and
After
Matthew
hearing
thought
these
was
praises,
right at the moment.
Ishtar felt a
bastard.
little ashamed, but her mood completely changed into pride and joy.
Chapter
Although
9
it was not his intention
After wombing made
Ishtar
had indeed helped the humans
the four
to
of them
eliminate
returned
the
to the
demon
nearby
beast.
encampment.
This was a place
praised
close
and
to the
cheered for
defensive
Ishtar
barrier,
from the bottom
although
of
it
their
had not
hearts,
collapsed yet,
which made Ishtar
many of the
feel
barriers
happy,
were already
which
in
was
a state
rare
of
for
collapse.
Ishtar.
Even if she had been
about to
spoiled
collapse.
since she was young.
However,
Ishtar's
they could still
nature
be
was
used
still
temporarily
good,
after
helping the
temporary
humans,
repairs.
being praised,
Not only that,
thanked, under the
and
command
cheered
of
by
Milako.
The
Naturally
soldiers
made
also set
Ishtar's
up
mood
temporary
very comfortable.
tent-like
Seems like the
residences
situation
adjacent
after
to
the
defensive
contract
barrier.
is not as bad as I thought.
You all returned
Ishtar
safely.
was obviously
I knew
referring
that
to
nothing
the
would
contract.
happen.
That
Merlin was
the
tricked her
first
with
to
his
come
word
out of the
games.
tent to welcome
Ishtar
everyone.
lifted the ponytail
However,
that was
it seemed that
fluttering
you guys were
in
a
front
little
of her
noisy
chest,
just now.
and then crossed her
I was
arms
very
in front of her
self-aware
chest.
and
Didn't
her
come
face
out.
showed
If
a
Merlin
hint
had
of
also
sadness.
joined in,
the situation would have
It's just that the
become
magic
even more
consumption
serious.
is a little high.
It's just that the joke
because
was
she
a little
was too
too
upset
harsh
in a
and
fit of rage.
someone couldn't take
Ishtar
it.
used
Woming
up
said
almost
and
all the
glanced at
magic in her
Ishtar.
body. It could be said that
Ishtar
the current
snorted
Ishtar
and
was
turned
an
her
empty
head to
shell.
the side.
She really
after
did not
realizing
have
that
a single
Woming
bit
was
of
looking
magic
at her.
left.
If there were enemies
and
now,
Matthew saw this
other than
scene
her
and
advantage of being
smiled
able to
helplessly
fly,
and
she was
awkwardly.
completely a lamb
In short,
waiting to be
the two
slaughtered.
people who went
Looking at
deep
the end
into
of the
underworld
explosion,
have returned
the ground was
safely.
completely
Although
under
the
the
commander
tower,
of the magical
and the ground was
beasts,
filled with
Musum
smoke
Maf,
and dust.
was released.
Ishtar
The
nodded.
other commander of the
Anyway,
magical beasts,
there's basically
Wugger,
no such
was killed in the underworld.
What's
for
wrong? Are you
provoking
lacking
the
magic?
goddess of the underworld?
Woming, who had suddenly
Masha
appeared
began to
beside
report
Ishtar
and
suddenly
smiled.
spoke.
One of the commanders of the
Frightened,
magical beasts
Ishtar
was killed,
hurriedly controlled
and the other escaped.
the heavenly
But
ship's
we have
horse,
0 casualties in the end.
to retreat a
There's no
distance away.
better result than this.
You? When did you come
Indeed,
over?
Just
Putting
now.
the number of
Woming
enemies
replied
aside,
very
the
calmly,
number of casualties
and then
on their
raised his
side
hand
was
again.
the most
The
important
magic
thing.
crystal on
The
the
demons
right
did
wing
not
suddenly
rush
disappeared.
to the fortress.
And a large
The
amount
collapse
of
of the
magic
fortress
was
was
instantly
entirely the
replenished in
result
Ishtar's
of
body.
Ishtar's
Looking at
noble
Ishtar's
artifact.
dazed face,
Therefore,
Woming
the
smiled.
soldiers did not
By the
suffer
way,
any casualties.
how does it feel?
Needless
help
to
a
say,
human?
Gadotsi and
It
the
feels
others
pretty
did
good.
not suffer
Although
any
Ishtar still had a
casualties.
lot of
The
resentment
task of
toward
killing
Woming,
and
she
chasing
was
the
already
demons was
unable to be
completed by Ishtar
unyielding
and
towards him.
Woming.
Because
of
that when
Woming,
Ishtar flew
she was
up,
praised by the
he was
soldiers
almost
and
ambushed
received
by
Woming's
Musum
magic.
Maf. At this moment,
However,
because
Ishtar was
even
vigilant
weaker than
because
before,
of Woming's words,
you can easily receive
Musum
the
Maf's
praise of a
ambush
human.
failed.
And most
Although
importantly,
Woming was quite upset,
you're very happy
that
yourself.
Musum Maf
Why do you have
managed
to be a
escape?
high and mighty
Moreover,
and
the
lawless
ground here has
goddess?
also
Probably
collapsed
because of the
because
fusion with
Ishtar's
Rin
noble
in
phantasm.
Osaka. It's
Compared
directly
to the original
connected to the
Ishtar,
underworld.
The current Ishtar
I'm afraid
was more
that the
reasonable.
magical beasts
so
will have
Woming
to
began
take
to
a
reason
detour,
with Ishtar,
even if they want to
I
come here.
I don't want that.
Woming added,
What I need is
it
to
could
be
be said
high
that this
and
was
mighty.
undoubtedly
Humans
a
only need to
man-made
give me
natural
gems.
mode.
I don't need their
In other
praise.
words, we don't need
However,
to set up defensive
these words were
facilities
full
here.
of arrogance.
Gadotsi
Not only
expressed
that,
her opinion,
but Ishtar's
even
actions
so,
were also
we have to
full of
consult with
arrogance.
King Gilgamesh.
Ishtar
before
once
we can
again
make a
crossed
decision.
her arms
Nawakamu
and turned her
walked
head to
over
the
from the
side
camp
to
behind
hide
every
her
blushing
blushing
cheeks
and expressed his
Although
opinion.
the previous
Why don't we
Ishtar,
talk in a tent?
with a little
We can also
arrogant.
let Mr.
Now,
Hyunryong
she was
have
more
good rest.
influenced by Rin
Nawakamu
and Osaka's
pointed at the tent
arrogance.
not far behind
In this
him.
regard,
Woming shook his head
did
and
not
declined.
say anything more. Instead,
I'm
he
not
looked at
tired.
her quietly. I'm just taking advantage of the
Ishtar was
situation
indeed
to have a
used to
chat
being
here.
arrogant.
But
After
even the
all,
most
they were almost all
mischievous
here.
child would want
If
to be
there
a
was
good
anything,
child one day.
they could just stand
However,
there and simply
after being
summarize
labeled
it.
as a
There was
mischievous
no need to
child
sit down
in the
and
eyes
have
of
a formal
others,
discussion.
Ishtar couldn't
Besides,
be more obedient.
we do have to
even if
consult
she
with
wanted
Gil.
to.
Besides,
Since that was the case,
I have something to report.
She might as well
I'm
continue
going to return
to
to
be a
Uruk
mischievous
immediately.
child. This was why
Gadotsi
Ishtar
was
became
stunned
more
when she
more
heard Woming's
unruly.
words.
And today,
And what should we do?
Woming forced
Gadotsi
Ishtar to be a
and the others
good child
originally
for
received
once.
the first
And
order
he even let
given to them
Ishtar
by King
taste the
Gilgamesh
sweetness of
to
it.
go to the jungle
This to
in the
Ishtar
southwest
indeed
to help the
was not a bad
Quetzalcoatl.
feeling. However,
Looking at the human
they didn't even
soldiers
see
who
the
were cheering for
Quetzalcoatl's
Ishtar in the
face
distance
before they were led by
Ishtar
Woming
extended
to
her
the
hand
Mountains
to
in the
Woming.
northwest.
Okay,
They were
today
directly across
Ishtar
the
will
Mesopotamia.
temporarily recognize
The first
you,
order was such a
Hyunryong.
mess.
Not
Not
to
to serve me
mention
as my temporary
Gadotsi
master, and the others couldn't continue to stay here.
Chapter
Even if they didn't go to
9:21.
Uruk with
I'm
Woming,
glad that you're willing
they
to
had to
turn
return
over
to
a
the
new
jungle
leaf,
in the
Ishtar.
southwest.
Your
The most
father will be
important
happy
thing was that
if he knows
Anna
about
was still
this.
there.
Senior
Woming
Villo,
reached out his hand to
why don't you
grab
send us
Ishtar's
back to the
soft
jungle?
hand.
But
Matthew
Ishtar
felt that
immediately
since Ishtar
broke
had been
free
recruited
and
they
slapped
should go
Woming's
back
hand in
and
the
meet up
face.
with Anna.
I regret
I'm not going to leave
Can
you
I
here.
cancel the contract?
Come back to Uruk with me.
Ishtar was
After
dissatisfied
Woming finished
with speaking.
Woming's tone,
He looked at
as if he was
Ishtar.
talking to a child.
You also come back to
Woming
Uruk
just
with
smiled
us.
to see
It
Gil.
was obvious
Ishtar
that
was
Ishtar was being
dumbfounded.
arrogant again.
Hey, come to think of it,
in Uruk
Ishtar,
City,
your
in a
noble
corner near the
phantasm
divine
is
tower,
really terrifying.
dark purple ripples
Woming said
suddenly
as he looked
appeared.
at the ground
Woming,
that was still
Gadotsi,
collapsing.
Matthew,
Smoke and dust
Anna,
rose from
Merlin,
the ground
and
that was
Ishtar,
penetrated.
who was
However,
very reluctant
the food in the
but
pot
didn't dare to say
was
anything,
from demonic beasts.
walked out of it.
After
Although
all,
Ishtar
I used
was
almost
very
all of my
reluctant.
mana,
Woming
except for the
ordered
mana
her
to
to
maintain
maintain
the current realm,
saying that she had to
it's
discuss
natural
with
for me
Gilgamesh
to be able
about
to
the
crusade
crusade
against the
effect.
monsters.
Ishtar
Although
flipped
the
her hair
price
and
was
looked
that
quite
Ishtar
proud.
had been verbally
verbally
after Ishtar
attacking
used the
Wuming
mana that
along the
Wuming
way,
gave her
after
and
arriving
almost
at the jungle
all of the
in
mana in her
southwest,
body, as well as
Wuming
the
and
resentment
Ishtar
in
were
her
alone
heart.
for a while.
Ishtar's mood
Gadotsi
became
and the others
extraordinarily
didn't know
good.
what happened.
In addition to
But
the
Ishtar
cheers of
became
the
much more
soldiers
obedient
and
after
Wuming's
returning to the
kind
team.
words.
After
Ishtar
that,
became
Wuming
even
found
more
mana,
arrogant.
but because he
Of
still
course,
didn't see
it
the
didn't mean that
Quetzalcoatl,
Ishtar couldn't do
Wuming
it
left the
without
message
Wuming's mana.
and took the 5
Ishtar's
of them back
noble
to Uruk through the
phantasm
portal.
mountain,
Oh,
shocking Star's
once
salary,
again,
and
we
galloped
reached
to
our
Kaigel's
destination
sheep,
in an
was
instant.
classified as a mountain
Gadotsi
noble
exclaimed in
phantasm.
surprise.
It was sublimated
No matter
from
when
the
I
deed
see it,
of killing
Senior
addiction.
Villow's ability
Although this was a
is
plane,
always
it was still
so
a part of the
mountain
magic
range.
range.
Matthew
Therefore,
seemed to be
the
enjoying
effect of the
himself.
mountain noble artifact could still be used.
BZZT.
Therefore, every time you entered
even
this
without
strange
Wuming's
space,
The
Ishtar
connection
only
between
needed
you
to supply
and
all of her
Chaldea
mana to the
will
noble
become
artifact
abnormal
to easily blow up half of the plane.
However, Roman's
such a
voice
large
was heard
amount of
from
mana
Gadotzi's
provided by
bracelet,
Silent Cry,
along with the
Ishtar's
abnormal
noble
signal.
phantasm
Villow's
was able to
ability
display
is probably
an extraordinary
different from
effect.
spatial magic.
Half of the
and
plane between the
teleportation
mountains
magic.
was directly
It's not
blown
something
up
that humans
by
can
Ishtar's
use,
noble artifact.
It's normal that
Countless
Chaldea
demonic
can't
beasts
detect
were
it.
either burned
Even Merlin
to
was
death by
very
the flames
interested in Wombing's
or
ability.
evaporated by the high
If he didn't
temperature.
know that Wombing
Even
would
if there
be
were a few
perfunctory,
demonic
he
beasts
would have
that were
asked him
lucky
a long
enough
time
to
ago.
survive, they directly fell into the hole in the ground.
It's
that
better
was
to be
blown
able to
up
get
by
to
the
our
explosion.
destination as
Such a
soon
large
as
number of
possible.
demonic
Anna
beasts were
sighed.
gone, just
She
like
looked
that.
quite tired.
This could be
She
considered
couldn't
a
help it.
great victory.
She was only there
for
to
the
help.
humans. And
However,
after a long
the
journey
demonic
to the
beast
jungle in the
commanders
southwest,
definitely wouldn't die.
she was left alone.
Previously,
Although she was
even
the one
Ulidim
who asked
didn't
for
die
it.
under Wombing's
After
multiple
that, before she could
spells.
see the
Therefore,
Quetzalcoatl,
the two
and before
demonic
she could
beast
do
commanders
anything
who were
useful,
lucky
she
to
was picked up
survive
by
and fall
Wombing
into the
and
collapsed
returned to
plane.
Uruk.
Definitely,
Anyone would be
included
unhappy
the
if
two
they were in her
demonic
shoes.
beast commanders
Mama,
who were still alive.
Anna,
After
don't be
looking
sad.
at Gadotzi
Returning to
and
Uruk
Matthew
means
who
that
had
you can
already
eat
met up with
delicious
Merlin.
butter cake for
Wombing
dinner.
then looked at Ishtar.
Merlin,
Ishtar,
who thought he was showing
do
a
you
kind,
dare to gamble
big
with
brother
me?
smile.
Wombing's
Looked
words
at Anna
piqued
as if she
Ishtar's
was a
interest.
kidnapper.
Whoa,
Gadotzi
what is there that this
and
goddess
Matthew
doesn't
couldn't help
dare to
but
do?
protect Anna behind
Ishtar
him,
proudly
watching
puffed
Merlin
out her
with
rather
vigilance.
embarrassing chest.
You look very suspicious,
looking as if she
Merlin.
wasn't afraid
Mr.
of
Merlin,
anything.
please behave yourself.
If that's the case,
the two were like
let's
parents
go to the
protecting
underworld.
their child.
No problem.
And they
However,
mocked Merlin with
after
disdain.
Ishtar agreed
This made
without
Merlin
hesitation,
feel quite
she was
hurt.
immediately
You are being
dumbfounded.
disdained, Merlin.
Wait.
Wombing also
Wait.
joined in.
What did you say?
Ma. Merlin didn't know
On the
what
ground,
to say.
Gadotzi
He could only
and
smile
Matthew,
and shrug
who
his
were brought
shoulders.
here by Wombing,
After a
stood
few
together
seconds
with
of
Merlin
silence,
and Nuwakamaru.
everyone couldn't help
as they
but
looked at the
burst into
severely
laughter.
collapsed ground.
It's
in
important
front
to
of
be
them.
able to maintain
They were both
a
shocked
happy
by
mood
Ishtar
and
and a large
singularity.
number of
But
demonic
you guys
beasts
shouldn't
that
always
died.
bully Merlin.
Sure
because
enough,
I always feel
Miss
the
Ishtar
same
is a
way.
true
This was the
goddess.
speech of Roman
Matthew
from
couldn't
Chaldea,
recover from the
who was
shock
given
for
a
a long
pessimist,
time.
a coward,
Right.
and other
Merlin,
negative titles by
is
a
the
large number
demonic
of
beast
servants.
commander destroyed?
What is this
Gadotzi,
speech of a
who
soft-footed
recovered
shrimp
first,
that does not know
started
how to
talk to
read the
Merlin.
atmosphere?
If it was just an
Said
attack
Ishtar,
like this,
in a
the
rare
demonic
moment.
beast commander
After all,
must still be
after
alive.
being taught a lesson
probably
by
fell
Wombing,
into the
Ishtar
underworld below.
didn't speak again.
Walking to the
or
edge
rather,
of the collapsed
she didn't
ground.
dare to speak again.
Merlin playfully
However,
put his head
when
on
Ishtar
his forehead
opened her mouth
and pretended
she
to
was
look
still
down.
annoyed.
What entered
By
his
the way,
eyes was a
what's the matter
bottomless
with the
darkness.
tennis?
There were no
As far as
tents in
Merlin was
Mesopotamia
concerned,
before
he
I
couldn't
left.
see what was at
Wombing
the bottom
suddenly
of the
remembered the
darkness at all.
temporary
Underworld
residences that
Gadotzi and
Nuwakamaru
Matthew were
commanded the
shocked when they
soldiers
heard this.
to build before.
An existence
Those
related to
residences
death was
were
indeed
all
a
tense,
little
which
uncomfortable
gave people the
for
feeling
humans.
of a military
The underworld
camp.
of Kansai,
After all,
is connected
Mesopotamia
to the earth.
was made of
Blowing
clay,
up a big hole
and
in
the
the
materials
ground
and cloth
is the
needed for
simplest
tents were still
and
scarce.
most violent way
However,
to enter the underworld.
if Gilgamesh wanted
Gadotzi
to,
was
he could
shocked by
definitely
Merlin's
invent
words
such a
about
thing.
the underworld
But
of
even if there was
Kansai
most
is
of the tents
connected
would
to
be
the earth.
replaced with sheepskin.
However,
Matthew was quite
that would be a little
concerned
bit
about another
extravagant,
matter.
and it
Mr.
might not
Merlin,
make ends meet.
this should be the end
That
of
was
the
why there were
Kansai
no
when the
tents
gods
in
disappeared.
Mesopotamia. Does
About
the
that,
underworld still
I heard that it
exist?
was an invention brought
Logically
by
speaking,
Kong Ming
as the
military
Kansai
advisor.
faded away,
Matthew
and the
heard some
gods
rumors
gradually
about it.
disappeared.
Some people
the
said that it
underworld
was
should have also
contributed by the
dissipated
king's
and
military
become
advisor.
non-existent.
In other
Therefore,
words,
the main
Matthew was
consciousness
puzzled by
of
Merlin's
Zhuge
words about the
Kong
demonic
is
beast commander
Gadotzi
falling
was
into the
stunned.
underworld. If the other
Ha, ha,
party
ha,
brought an
Matthew.
item that
Don't forget
didn't
about
exist
the
in this
three
era,
goddesses alliance,
then why couldn't
Merlin's
they determine
tone
the
was
other party's
flirtatious
background
as he
before?
smiled at Matthew.
No, it's hard
This
to
made
say.
Matthew's cheeks turn red with shame.
Zhuge Kong
Then
Ming
Gadotzi
also
stood
had
in front of
tents during the
Matthew
Three
and
Kingdoms
glared at
period.
Merlin.
So
After
that's how
all,
it is.
the army
Because
needed
the
to be
goddess of
stationed
the underworld
marching
of
to war.
Mesopotamia
Wombing
has returned
thought
to
of
this
such a
era.
possibility.
The underworld
If you think
was
about it
also
carefully,
brought over.
it really doesn't look like something like
Gadotzi's
a modern
bracelet
tent.
emitted Roman's
Matthew
voice.
nodded.
Roman,
Moreover, in
who was
Matthew's
Chaldea,
opinion,
whether it was
spoke again
Uruk
while
or
recording the
Zhuge Kong
information.
Ming, who was the
Was it
main
really so
consciousness,
easy to enter
both
the
of them could
underworld?
do this.
And the entire
After all,
underground,
no matter who
of
was the main
Mesopotamia,
consciousness,
is the
both of them had
underworld.
knowledge about
In the face of
military
Roman's
tents.
question,
Both
Merlin
of them could
chuckled
use
and
their
laughed.
professional skills wells to create
actually, I don't know
military
much about
tents,
it. Merlin
which are
smiled and
convenient
scratched his
places
head.
to live in.
However,
Whether
it was
it is
better
the
to teach a
underworld
man
or
how
not,
to fish than
Henry
to give
Young
him
will
fish.
definitely go down.
After making a sample,
Speak of the devil.
the construction method
As soon as
would be
Merlin
taught to the
finished
soldiers,
speaking, and then
Gadotsi
all they needed to
and
do
Matthew
was
saw
mass
looming
produce the
and
materials.
Ishtar rushing
What is
down
the
from
background of
sky.
that person?
If only they could
Merlin
ignore
must
the
know,
strange
but
posture
he didn't tell
of
us.
looming and
What a
Ishtar.
disappointment. They saw
Gadotsi
Lumi
let out a
pulling one of
sad
Ishtar's
cry
feet
and looked at
and
Merlin
flying
with
down.
complaining eyes.
After all,
Ishtar's face
if
was
Merlin
dull,
told the truth,
and it was obvious
they wouldn't be
that
so
she
concerned.
didn't understand what was going
Ha
on.
ha! Is that
Don't
His
worry.
Excellency?
It's best to
Henry
find
Young?
out for yourself.
I heard that His
And we'll be able to
Excellency
see the other
Henry
party
Young has
soon.
returned,
So there's no
it's
need
been
to
a long
rush.
time since we
Merlin
last
was
met.
still thick-skinned.
Nawakamaru was
Sure enough,
deeply touched
Merlin
by
is
the
terrible.
meeting between his peers
As
and
expected of
followers
Anna,
after half
her
a year.
words were still
Half a
so
year
sharp.
ago, as if
Wooming
appeared in
ignoring
Uruk one
The
step
few of
ahead
them
chatted.
However,
as they
before
slowly
they could get
walked
along
towards the
and
divine
communicate,
pagoda.
Wooming left.
Only Roman,
But in the past
who was in
6
Chaldea,
months, only
looked like he
Misobo
couldn't be
Benkei,
revived. Leonidas
so I've been
sighed,
ignored,
and
after
himself
that.
were left. Leonardo
However,
da Vinci,
Nawakamar's
who was drinking
question was
coffee,
not answered
smiled
by
helplessly.
because Wooming
You have to
pulled
pull yourself
Ishtar
together,
and flew
Romani.
straight into
You
the
have to eat your
bottomless
own
plane
fruit.
in front of everyone.
Although Leonardo da Vinci's eyes were overflowing
Chapter
with joy.
922.
Yes,
That,
while Roman
is it
was
really
being
okay
comforted
for
by
Ms.
Leonardo da
Ishtar
Vinci
to go to the
because the
underworld?
location of the portal was
Matthew,
very
who
close
had
to
read
the Tower of
Mesopotamia's
God.
mythology,
Wooming
knew
and the
very
others
well
had
that
already stepped
Ishtar
into the Tower of
arrogantly
God.
entered the
The
underworld
soldiers they met
and was
along the
killed
way
by the
all
goddess
showed
of the
surprise and
as
respect
a servant.
to Wooming and
The
Ishtar.
inheritance of being
But after
killed
seeing
by
that
the
the
goddess
two
of the
brought people
underworld
from the Chaldean
may
embassy,
cause the underworld
they were
to
worried that their
impose some
greetings would
restrictions on
delay the
Ishtar.
other party's important
However,
matters.
before
So the
anyone could
soldiers
answer
didn't say
Matthew's question,
anything to Wooming
Ishtar's
and
miserable
Ishtar.
scream
However,
came from the
they
collapsed
also
crater.
bowed respectfully to
no.
Wooming and
Everyone
Ishtar
looked at each other
before they
and
obediently
smiled
left.
awkwardly.
Sure
It turned
enough,
out that Ishtar
assassin
was
as a
forced by
Hyunryong
Wooming
is
at
very
this
popular
moment.
in the Europe.
Gaddafi suddenly
After another
realized the
soldier
problem.
silently
By the way,
left,
Gaddafi, the way to go
suddenly
down.
spoke.
Well,
After all, whether it's
I'm
me
a
or
Uruk
Hyunryong,
Hyunryong, and
we don't have the
completely
means
different
to
from Ishtar
safely
when I'm a
enter the
god.
underworld.
I've always
If you
taken
want to enter
care
the
of the
underworld,
humans.
you have to
Seems
jump
like
down.
that's true.
Merlin nodded
Matthew
proudly.
recalled the situation
Jump down
just now.
Roman,
The
soldiers
soldiers
were
were
indeed
Chaldea
very
couldn't help
respectful
but
to
exclaim.
Wooming and
The
Ishtar.
instruments in Chaldea
But the way
were
they looked at the
interfered
two
with,
of them was
and they
different.
couldn't detect
They
how
were
deep the crater
respectful and
was.
grateful
How could
to
they jump
Wooming
down
from the bottom of
directly
their
in
hearts.
this situation?
But when the soldiers
Ms.
looked at
Nawakamarу,
Ishtar,
let's
it
not
was as
talk
if they were
about this
looking
for
at a
now.
high and
Matthew
mighty
sighed
god who could
helplessly.
not be offended.
Merlin, what are you so proud of?
Although both
Gaddafi
were
looked at
respectful,
Merlin with
they were
contempt.
actually not the same.
Nawakamarу
Ahem.
put her thin
But
green into the
I can see
scabbard
that the
and
Uruk
also
soldiers
sighed.
also respect
Right
you.
now,
Miss
we can only
Ishtar,
wait for the Uruk's
Matthew
reinforcements
immediately
to arrive
added after being pushed
before
by
making a
Gaddafi.
decision.
However,
there are only a few
this
of
cannot
us,
cover up the fact
and we can't
that
enter
even
the
Ishtar
underworld.
had to admit.
Neo-Rawan
However,
was,
this
after
fact
all,
made Ishtar
a former
even
general.
angrier.
Before
So
he
if
could
it's
determine
different,
whether
I don't need their
Wooming,
respect anyway.
Ishtar,
The humans
and the others
only need to
needed
offer me
reinforcements.
gems and gold.
He could not act on
Oof.
impulse.
Ishtar,
But,
Mr.
said
Merlin,
as she sped up,
if
and
we take
walked
this
toward the room
opportunity
at the
to
top,
support the
where
senior
Gilgamesh
Villo,
was dealing with
can we
matters.
take down the goddess
This
of
made
the underworld
everyone
in
feel
one
ashamed.
fell swoop?
Don't worry about
Matthew
her.
had a bold
She'll be
idea.
fine after a while.
Yes, if we support
Let's go.
Assassin,
The place where
maybe
Gil
we
is
can take
dealing
down
with
the goddess of the
matters is
underworld
right in front of
one
us.
fell swoop.
According to the
And then
current
we can
situation
focus
of this
on the
world,
goddess of
he
Warcraft.
should be staying there forever.
Thinking of this,
Gaddafi
when they arrived at the door at the
excitedly
top of the
pulled
divine tower,
Matthew's hand.
the soldiers
and
guarding
prepared
the
to
door
go to
were
the
shocked
underworld
when they
with
saw
Matthew.
Wooming.
Wasn't it
and
just
Ishtar.
jumping down?
They immediately
Previously,
knelt down
when they came to this
respectfully.
singularity.
Lord Hyunryong,
They had also
Lord
experienced
Ishtar,
the experience
welcome back
of
to
falling
the
from
Uruk.
high altitude.
Wooming
It
had
was a new
indeed
experience
left
because
after
of the
all.
battle with Gorgon.
However,
and
Ishtar
Merlin
had
blocked
left
the
the
way
Uruk
with his
because
staff.
she was always
It's not
running
that
around.
easy.
She was
You
often
two,
not
listen to
in
me
the Uruk.
first. In short,
Merlin
the
denied
two of them were
Gaddafi's
indeed welcome
suggestion.
back.
Is
the
the king
underworld
inside?
is full of
Wooming
death
asked
energy,
the two soldiers
and
who stood
ordinary
up.
people can't
Yes,
stay there
Lord
for a long
Hyunryong.
time.
King
Even if you wear a
Gilgamesh
special
is
magic
dealing with
dress,
matters.
you can only
Lord
stay
Siduri
there for a
and
short
Lord
period of
Baiqing
time.
are also
Besides,
inside.
Nawakamarу,
However,
and I can't help.
this was just a routine
At most,
inquiry.
will be a burden
After
to the
all,
Villo.
the door
He
was
already
so
has
big
Ishtar,
that Wooming had
and
already
we
seen
don't
the
need to send a
situation
few more
inside.
burdens to burden.
Gilgamesh sat on
Merlin
the throne,
became serious,
constantly picking
Legend
up
has
and
it that in
putting
the
down
underworld
slate
of the
and
Mesopotamia,
quickly dealing with
the
matters.
goddess of the underworld,
Siduri stood beside
Ereshkigal,
Gilgamesh
is the
to help
ruler
record
of
things.
everything.
in
As
the
for
underworld.
Misobo Benkei,
He stood
any
under
god
the
in the
throne with his
underworld will be
eyes
restricted by
closed,
the underworld,
waiting quietly.
and their divinity
Let's
will
go.
be suppressed.
Wooming said as he took the
making them
lead
powerless.
and walked into the room
Without
at the
divinity,
top of the divine
they
tower,
probably won't be
where
weakened or
Gilgamesh dealt
suppressed,
with government
but if they
affairs.
aren't alive, I'm afraid they won't be able to exert their power. This was the opinion
Chapter
of
9:31.
who had urgently
On the
obtained
king's
information
throne,
about the
Gilgamesh,
goddess of the underworld,
assisted by Siduri,
Ereshkigal, was
That was why
efficiently
Merlin
handling
said
the
that he
various
couldn't
matters
help.
on the clay tablets.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
Won't Ishtar,
Hyunryong,
an
you're
assassin,
back.
be in danger?
Even when he saw that the visitor
Gaddafi
was
a little
Wooming,
panicked.
Gilgamesh
Ishtar was
didn't put
killed
down
by the
clay
goddess of
tablet
the
in his
underworld.
hand.
Instead,
Wooming was a god
he
of
looked at the clay
Mesopotamia
tablet
while chatting
Uruk
with
Hyunryong.
Siduri
His
slightly
divinity
bowed to
must be
Wooming
high,
and Ishtar, and
She Wuming's
She couldn't
current
interrupt the
identity
conversation
was a
between the
servant,
king
not a
and the god
living
at this
being
moment.
in that case.
Moreover,
After
she
entering
still
the
needed to
underworld,
classify
wouldn't
the
they
clay
become the
tablets
lambs
that
to be
Gilgamesh
slaughtered by
processed,
Ereshkigal?
so she couldn't get away.
But even if
for
they
a
are
while.
alive,
After
there are
all,
still risks.
I was tricked by Gorgon.
Although the
How can I
goddess
not
of the
come back?
underworld,
Wuming
Ereshkigal,
responded to Gilgamesh
can't leave
with
the
a gentle
underworld.
smile.
As long as she is in
yes,
the underworld,
it's not in your
she can
character to
enjoy
not
the
respond to
authority of
Gorgon.
the underworld.
Gilgamesh
This is the
put
most
down the
powerful
clay tablet in
ability
his hand.
of the goddess.
This was the
of
last
underworld.
one that needed
Even
to be
if she
processed.
faces a living being
Afterward,
who can ignore
Gilgamesh
the
raised his
restrictions of the
head
underworld,
and looked at Wuming.
Ereshkigal
One high and
won't
one
be
low
at a
and
disadvantage.
smiled.
If people who didn't know
if
saw
it's as
this
recorded
scene,
in the myths,
they would probably
the
think
goddess
that this
of
was
the
a
underworld,
beautiful scene of a king
and
is an invincible existence
in the underworld.
However, in the end,
Roman
felt
adage.
that something was wrong.
In other words,
it was as if
only
Gorgon,
the living
who
and I can
Looming
ignore the
Gilgamesh
suppression
were thinking
of the
underworld's
was
authority
going to be in
and
big
cause
trouble.
harm.
Then
To
Gilgamesh
Matthew
looked at
nodded.
Siduri,
If that's the
who
case,
had already sorted
can't
the
we
clay
enter the
tablets.
underworld to support
Siduri
them?
passed the
Gadasi
processed
suggested.
clay tablets
However,
to the various
Merlin
departments.
shook his head again.
Yes, King, I'll do it right
Kachika,
away.
How can you
After
be sure that
Siduri
you and
bowed,
Matthew will
she
encounter the
and the
villa
guards ran
first
down from
and
the king's
not
throne
Ereshkigal?
with a portion
If
of
it's
the
just
clay
Matthew
tablets.
and
Just when
Ereshkigal
she passed by
alone,
Wooming
although
and
the
Ishtar,
chances of winning are not
Siduri
zero,
paused again
it's not
and
high
bowed to the two of them.
Also,
Don't
unlike
forget that the
Gilgamesh,
two demonic
Siduri
beast
still
commanders
respected
also
the gods,
fell into the underworld
especially
together.
the Uruk, Hyunryong,
Merlin's words were
and
like the
Uruk
last
city
straw
god
that
Ishtar.
broke the camel's back.
Oh,
Is it
Gadasi
this the
didn't know what
stupid
to
goddess
say.
who ran away
At this
from
time,
home?
how'd you know to come
Nawakamu,
back today?
who had been
Gilgamesh
quiet for a while,
tilted his
spoke.
body
If
and
it's
supported
only
his
you and
chin with
Matthew,
one hand.
if you encounter
as if he had
any one
just
of them,
noticed
even if
Ishtar.
Sir Matthew's
His tone was
shield
full
could
of
defend
sarcasm.
against the opponent's attack,
Ishtar would
it's only
definitely
a matter of
explode if
time
she
before
heard
you lose.
Gilgamesh's words.
After all,
but
the
Wooming
demonic
glared
beast
at
commanders
Ishtar,
don't just
indicating
have
that
pure
she
strength.
shouldn't mess around.
And if you
and stay
encounter
put.
both of them at the same time,
like a powder keg,
although
that had
Nawakamu
expanded to the
didn't
limit
continue
but
to
couldn't
speak,
explode,
the result
Ishtar
was inevitable
pouted,
death.
clasped her hands,
As a surviving
and turned her head
servant
away.
of the beheading
There was even
operation,
a faint mist
it can be said that
above
I
her
have
head.
a deeper
Oh, it looks like you
understanding
trained
of
this
the
stupid
demonic
goddess
beast
well,
commanders than
Hyunryong.
you.
Let's not talk
Gilgamesh
about the
was
lion-headed
surprised by
warrior.
Ishtar's
The other
forbearance.
demonic beast
Although he
commander,
didn't show it on his
Musamafu,
face,
Gilgamesh
was
was
actually
actually
very surprised.
It's not an existence
After all,
that a servant can
anyone who
face
knew
alone.
Ishtar knew
After Nawakamu
that she and
finished
Gilgamesh
speaking,
were the most
he walked
incompatible.
directly toward the almost
Even Wooming's
collapsed
relationship with
defensive
Ishtar
barrier.
was better than Gilgamesh's
I'm going to
relationship
organize
with
the
Ishtar.
soldiers,
But in the
and
face
wait
of
for the
Gilgamesh's
arrival of Uruk's
sarcasm
people
before
and
making a
ridicule.
decision,
Ishtar
and I
actually
believe that
endured.
Sir Hyunryong
If it weren't for the fact that
after
Ishtar's
Nawakamu
divinity in
finished
front of him
speaking
really
and
belonged
left,
to Ishtar,
whether it was Gadasi,
Gilgamesh would have thought
Matthew, that someone was
Roman,
pretending
or
to
Merlin,
be Ishtar.
they didn't speak anymore,
as if they were giving
I just used some
Gadasi
small
time to
tricks,
think.
King.
I think
After
if it were
a moment,
you
Merlin
would have guessed my
opened his
tricks
mouth.
even if I tried
I'm
to
also
hide them.
very worried
In an
about
instant,
the billow.
Gilgamesh
After all,
understood what
he's my
Wooming
close
meant by
friend.
tricks.
However,
it was
worrying
nothing
about
more
him
than
is
starting
useless.
with Ishtar's weakness.
For now,
we can
probably
only
using
believe
money
in the
to
villa.
coerce her.
You must know
That was
the
indeed
Villo
the case.
took the initiative
When Ishtar
to
knew
enter
that she
the
would be
underworld.
forced by Wooming
Since he took the
to follow
initiative
him
to enter
the
the
Uruk,
underworld,
Ishtar
then the
cursed
Villo
Wooming
certainly
and all
won't
kinds
make
of
such a
rumors
low-level
and
mistake.
slanders blurted out.
Indeed, in
although
the
it
case
wasn't
of
to an
knowing
amazing
that there's a tiger
extent,
in the mountain,
after Gadasi,
only those who had a card up their
Matthew and
sleeves
others
would do
heard it.
something like
It could be
going to
said
the
that it
tiger's
changed
mountain.
the image of
Otherwise,
Ishtar
it
in
would be
their
a
hearts.
waste.
After
Wooming
that,
was certainly not a
Wooming
person who would
briefly
do something
separated
for free.
Ishtar from
He
the
must have his
crowd in
own
the southwest
considerations.
jungle.
I know.
During this period,
I'm just a little bit
Wooming
worried
said
about
something
assassin.
to Ishtar.
At that moment,
If you can listen to me
Gadasi also
obediently,
recovered, and
since
keep
it was
your
already
mouth
like
shut,
this at this stage,
I will fight for
then
a
they should
tenth of the
believe
Babylon
and
treasury
wait.
for you as your reward. This made Ishtar's
Chapter
eyes
923
suddenly shine.
Deep underground,
Wooming's request
in the
was
underworld.
not that simple.
After Ishtar's
Of course,
noble
if
phantasm
you can hold back when
caused
facing
the earth
Gil,
to shake,
I will fight
the entrance
for
to
a
the
tenth of
underworld
Babylon
was
treasury
opened.
for you.
Wooming
as an
brought
additional
Ishtar
reward.
into the
However,
underworld.
if you
When
don't
they
listen
arrived
to
at a
me
path
and
that
can't
looked
hold
like a
back,
stone bridge,
all these
Wooming
rewards will
let
be
go of
canceled,
Ishtar's
and your
ankle
original
and took a
rewards will be
deep breath.
reduced by half.
As expected,
The first
the
half of the
place is
sentence
filled
made
with the
Ishtar's
aura of
eyes
death.
shine
Not
even
only
brighter.
that,
But
it
the
was
second
dark
half of the
everywhere.
sentence made Ishtar's
Along the way,
eyes
there were
shine
one
even
or two
brighter.
cages that
Ishtar
looked like
began to
spears with a
calculate
floating
in her
blue
heart.
flame.
If
The
everything went
entire
well,
underworld
she
was
could finally
filled
get
with darkness
25%
and
of the
faint
treasures
blue
in the
light.
Babylon treasury,
ouch,
which was a
ouch.
quarter.
Ishtar was
However,
lying there in pain.
if it didn't go
She
well,
struggled to get
she
up
could only
and
get
held her
less
head
than
as if she was
10%
having
of
a
treasures,
headache.
which was
After
directly
Ishtar was
reduced
brought
from
into the
quarter to
underworld by
20th.
Wooming in
It's
a
easy,
rather
right?
rough way.
Just don't lose
She
your
had bumped
temper
into
and
many
be
things
obedient.
along the way.
And
Ishtar's
you'll have a
head
chance
was
to
the
get
most
25%
when
of the
Wooming
treasures
let
in
go
the
of
Babylon
Ishtar.
treasury.
Ishtar's
if you lose
head
your
hit the
temper
ground
and
first.
don't listen to me,
As expected,
you will only
I
be
shouldn't have
left with
trusted your
5% of the
perverted
treasures.
character.
Although
Ishtar
5%
rubbed
of the
her head as
treasures
she
is
stared
indeed
at
a
Wooming
lot.
fiercely.
It is not
As
even
Wooming
10%.
used to deal with Ishtar,
TSK,
he knew her
TSK.
very well. Wombing's
Not
words
only that,
echoed
Ishtar
around
also had to deal with
whose eyes began to
indirectly.
spin.
Ishtar
Gradually,
also had a
Ishtar,
good understanding
who could
of
not
women.
resist the temptation,
Ishtar already knew that
chose
this
to
guy
fall into
was
the
a
devil's
perverted
trap.
person.
Ishtar covered
Ishtar
her
had
head,
a deeper
and her
impression
eyes
of
were
Wombing's
downcast
perverted
as she
interests.
finally made the
You
final
despicable
decision.
guy.
You know that the
I know.
underworld
I will
has a
be
natural
obedient.
suppressive effect.
The power of
on the
money
gods. Once again
Why'd you bring
played
me
its
in?
role. In short,
Ishtar walked
Gilgamesh's
up to
guess
Wombing
was
in a
not
threatening
far
manner.
from the truth.
His eyes
Gadotsi
ferocious as
and
he
the
vented
others
his
thought that
grievances.
Ishtar had
Because
become
we need to
so
chase
obedient
after the magical
because of the
beast
influence
commander.
of the force contract.
Wombing naturally
Who
turned
would have
his
thought
head,
that Wombing
spread
would
his
still
hands,
use money
and
and
shrugged his
treasures
shoulders
to make
with a
Ishtar
helpless look.
choose to
But why did you drag
compromise?
me in?
This
Why don't
king
you
is
just
so
come yourself?
happy today.
Ishtar hugged
This
her
king
head
will
with
not
both
pursue the
hands.
crime of
Her
abducting
eyes were
Chaldea
empty,
that this king
as if she
sent
was in
to
the depths
support
of hell.
the Quetzalcoatl.
Although the underworld was
Gilgamesh
held to
could not
Ishtar
help
in a way,
but look at the
cough,
Chaldea
cough.
led by
I'm not
Gaddafi.
feeling too well.
Although they were
Maybe it's because of
Chaldea,
the death
only
aura
Gaddafi
in the
and
underworld.
Matthew could be
That's all.
considered as Chaldea's
I'm leaving now.
people. You can deal with the matter of the beast commander yourself.
Anna was brought by Merlin.
To put it bluntly,
and Merlin was
Ishtar
only sent
wanted
by
to
Gilgamesh
escape.
to
However,
support Gaddafi.
Woman would not
and
let
Matthew.
Ishtar escape.
Although Olga
Ishtar
Marie and her
helped me
vampire
kill the commander
follower,
of the
Parmelia,
magical
had
beasts
completed their
and investigate the situation
of
of the goddess of the
singularity,
underworld.
Ereshkigal.
According to Roman's
Buzz,
explanation,
Ishtar's
the holy
body
grail
glowed
that
with a
sealed
red
the entire
light,
concept
as if she was
of
under a
Florence
command spell.
underwent a mutation.
That was the embodiment
Something
of the
followed the
coercive
demon
god
power
Pillar
of the
Florence
dependent
and
contract
groped its way
to
to
Chaldea.
Yes. Ishtar, who was about to turn around and leave, turned around and
Chapter
answered with
932.
difficulty. Although
Damn you,
Chaldea
Henrion.
was located in the
After
Antarctic
that,
continent,
Ishtar
other than
knelt on the
Chaldea,
ground with her hands
all
on the
other
ground
places were
and
burned
let
by
out a
Gydia.
sorrowful cry.
Therefore,
that
Chaldea,
moved even
which
the
survived
underworld.
under the influence
Woman's
of the
command from the
magnetic field,
dependent
could be said to be an
incarnation was
alternative
different from the
singularity.
command spell.
When everyone in the world is
The
crazy,
command spell's command
and
would be
only one
resisted
person
to
is
varying
sober.
degrees.
The one who is sober,
depending on the
is
details,
the crazy one.
the magic
That
power
was
of the
more or less the
servant
case.
and other factors.
When the whole world was
the longer the
burned by
command spell
Gydia,
was delayed,
Chaldea,
the effect of the
which
command
was lucky
spell
enough to
would
survive,
gradually weaken.
became existence
Although the effect of the
similar
command
to a
spell
singularity.
could not
To
completely
put it simply,
disappear.
Chaldea
the
could
servant
no
would be
longer
able to
be
control the
regarded as an
command spell to the
institution that
extent
still
that it
existed
would
in the
not
Antarctic
affect them.
continent.
However,
Chaldea
Woman's
should be
command
treated
came from
as
an
an
existence similar
incarnation.
to other
Woman's
singularities.
ability to control
Therefore,
his
if
dependent
someone wanted
was
to invade
absolute.
Chaldea,
They must
however,
first find
because
Chaldea.
Woman and Ishtar
However,
signed a
this was full of
contract related to the
difficulties.
magical beast.
The reason why Chaldea
Woman could only
was
use
able
the
to discover
magical
singularities
beast
was because
as the main
Chaldea
command to
had
forcibly
three
control
important
Ishtar.
things.
Under
Earth
the influence
environment
of
model,
Woman's command,
Chaldea,
the
Yasnir,
current Ishtar had
future
no way
observation
to
lens,
leave the underworld.
Sheba's psychic
Only by
calculation
completing the
device,
command
Trismegistes
issued by
with the
Woman.
cooperation
Ishtar
of the three
could leave the
singularities could be discovered.
Although it was somewhat
and through
inconvenient to
Chaldea's
use the
psychic
command
transfer
related to
technology,
the magical
human
beasts
masters could be
to
sent
control
to various
Ishtar.
Ishtar.
There was
If
no
one
other
wanted to
way.
discover the
The
location
existence of
Chaldea,
Woman's
they
dependent
probably
was
didn't need to go
basically
through
voluntary.
so much trouble.
Only Ishtar
However,
was tricked by
Chaldea
Woman to
wasn't
sign
easy
a
to
temporary
discover
contract.
either. That was
However,
to say,
probably
the contract
because
between the
Chaldea
two
took
would be
in
completely
Floros,
lifted
who was
after
sealed in the
magical
golden
beasts
holy
were
grail by
eliminated
Woman,
and the goddess
some
of magical
unknown
beasts
existence
was
used
defeated.
this
It was
as a
basically
medium
impossible to
discover
make
Chaldea.
Ishtar sign
Currently,
a contract.
it was on its way
with
to
Woman
Chaldea.
from the bottom
The
of her
existence
heart.
in a certain
If it was really
location
possible
was
to make
probably
Ishtar
Gydia.
obediently
Woman thought
sign
so.
a dependent
However,
contract from the
Woman
bottom of her
thought
heart,
that this was
then
impossible.
Ishtar would not be
Floros
so
was
naughty
sealed
before.
by his own power.
Although Woman
Coupled
also
with the
considered
influence
setting
of
a word
Chaldea's
trap to
magnetic
make
field,
Ishtar his
it was
dependent
impossible for
permanently
Gydia
to discover
Woman
him.
considered that
Unless
the
Gydia
disadvantages
had
of
become
making
even
Ishtar
more
his
powerful,
dependent
she would be able to
outweighed
find the
advantages.
current location
So Woman
of
gave up on
Floros
the idea.
through her previous
Although
relationship with
Ishtar
him.
was the
Fortunately,
mistress of the
because
sky in
Chaldea's
Mesopotamia
equipment was
and
quite
was a
advanced,
rather powerful
they discovered
goddess.
it in time.
She was
After
also
that,
a willful fool.
Olga Marie
If
used
Woman
her
really
half-mature
used the
third
word
method
game to
to
trick
cooperate
Ishtar
with her
and make her
vampire
his
follower,
dependent,
Parmelia,
it would certainly
to
solve
add
the
an additional
problem of
layer of
Ishtar's
seal
willfulness
to the Holy
once
Grail
and
that
for
sealed
all.
Floros.
However,
preventing
if Woman
the
really did
unknown
that,
existence
it
from
would probably be
advancing.
enough for
However,
Woman to suffer.
the price was that
In the
Olga
end,
Marie and
Woman
Parmelia
would definitely
couldn't
end up
leave the
tricking
golden
herself.
Holy Grail that
Just the
sealed
attributes
Floros
of being
for the
a
time
fool and a
Therefore,
loser could
Roman
make
was
Woman
still the
suffer.
commander.
Through the past,
Parmelia
Woman
couldn't
was
go to the
very
singularities
sure of
in
this. Let's
Mesopotamia
go, Ishtar.
with Gaddafi.
We came to the
and
underworld for
Matthew.
business.
However,
After knocking
if Olga
Ishtar's
Marie
head,
was the commander,
Woman
in
took the
Chaldea,
lead.
there was a
and
high
walked along
chance
the
that she
road.
would quarrel
Damn
with
it!
Gilgamesh.
I didn't want to come to the underworld.
After all,
With
you were the
Olga
one who
Marie's
dragged
temper,
me here.
How could she
Ishtar
tolerate
was now
Gilgamesh
feeling
making
very
Gaddafi
wrong.
and Matthew
Why am I so
spend
unlucky
so
to
much
meet
time
this
doing
guy,
odd jobs?
Hyunryong?
Fortunately,
God, Father God,
Roman
where are you?
was the temporary
Your
commander.
daughter is now
After
suffering
all,
under Hyunryong.
Roman's
personality was
save
more
your daughter.
gentle. Ishtar, who was clearly a goddess,
For example,
prayed to God.
At this moment,
it was enough to
Roman,
see that
who was
Woman
monitoring
was driving
Chaldea,
Ishtar crazy.
was in a mess.
Your
because
father
of
once
Gilgamesh's
asked me to
speech.
take good care of you.
What should we do?
And now,
Leonardo
I have a
da
way
Vinci?
to make you obedient.
I guess that King Gilgamesh would be
The way was,
angry.
of course, referring
On the
to
contrary,
the dependent contract.
Leonardo da Vinci Wuming turned around
quite calm.
and looked at Ishtar,
Isn't the Villos
who was
still
praying with
with
her
the
hands
Chica
clasped
and the
together,
others?
but was
Don't
stunned
worry,
by Wuming's
Wuming
words.
wouldn't let Gadotsi
I will teach you
and
well
Matthew
during
be
this
punished.
time, but in fact,
Stupid goddess
Gilgamesh had
Ishtar.
no intention
In the
of
end,
punishing the two at all.
Wuming gave Ishtar
However,
a rather
he still
pleasant
had to say
smile.
what needed
But
to be
this
said.
smile was like the
Wuming
smile
walked in
of the
front of
devil in
Gadotsi
Ishtar's
and
eyes.
Matthew, and
At
looked
this
at
moment,
Gilgamesh
before
defensively.
Ishtar could look
I was the
forward
one
to
who
the
made them
cruel
change their
future,
plan. The roar
and
of a magical
they also had a
beast
part to
came
play in
into
getting
their
Ishtar
ears.
to join us.
Wuming and Ishtar
Yes,
looked at each
yes,
other.
This
Both
can
of
be
their
considered
eyes were
as making
full
up
of
for their
solemnity.
mistakes.
Immediately,
Merlin also stood
Wuming
beside
ran
Gadotsi
directly in the
and
direction
others
of the
and said
roar
something
of the
good.
magical beast.
Hell, although Ishtar
And
is a
Ishtar
stupid
had no
goddess,
time to look
she is still
forward to the
somewhat
cruel
useful.
future.
However,
And directly
it is
followed
true
Wuming's
that she has
footsteps.
violated this
No matter
king's
what,
will,
dealing with the
and
magical
Henryong
beast
was the one who instigated her to do so.
Logically speaking, she should be guilty of the same crime.
Chapter 924.
Hearing this, the one
Ishtar,
that roared must
whose
be the
back was
commander
facing
of the demonic
Gilgamesh,
beasts, tried her best
there was
to
no
hold
doubt
back
about
her
that.
anger. Not
In
to
the
mention
end,
that the
she couldn't
mass-produced
stand it
demonic
anymore and
beast
said,
wouldn't
"I'm
be
going
able
out
to
for a
make
walk,
such a
Yurak.
loud roar.
Don't worry about
Even
me."
if there were some demonic
Then she
beasts
flew
that
away.
weren't killed
You
by
stupid
Ishtar's
goddess.
noble phantasm,
Gilgamesh's
and
anger
fell
was
directly from the
completely
ground to the
understandable.
underworld. At
That's
such a
right.
height,
Ishtar
even if it was a
summoned the
strengthened,
horse
mass-produced
to break
demonic
through the ceiling
beast
again.
it would still
This
be
king will
severely
remember it
injured.
on your head.
Moreover,
Henryong.
it would only be a
Gilgamesh
serious injury
stared at
and not a
Wuming
light
with
one.
annoyance.
Perhaps,
However,
only the
this
demonic
king will
beast
not
commanders
delay the
with
proper
extremely
business.
strong
That will be
physiques
your
could
punishment.
fall to the
In
underworld
fact,
and
Gilgamesh often
Then,
used his
what did the
clairvoyance
uninjured
to see
magical
things
beast
when he took a
commander
short
encounter
break.
that caused him to let
Coincidentally,
out such a
Gilgamesh
bluffing
inadvertently
roar
saw the
filled
matter
with
between
shock and
Wuming
panic.
and Gadotsi.
The answer was that the
and
demonic
others.
beast commanders
Therefore,
were attacked.
Gilgamesh
by
knew
the
very
Garrel
well
spirits.
that
The
Gadotsi
roads in
and
the
Matthew
underworld
did
went
not
from the
actually
top
see
to
the
bottom.
contents of the
They were
slate
all
that he
stone
asked
bridges
the
that were
small
naturally
pterosaur
formed
to
in
send
the
to the
underworld.
south.
The
In
stone
fact,
bridges
Gilgamesh
intersected
only
with
wanted
each
to
other
train
and
Gadotsi
extended
and Matthew.
downwards like a maze.
After all,
But
the two
apart
of them
from
were
that,
really immature.
there were also
and
places
needed
where
more
few
training.
stone bridges
Gilgamesh once
converged
heard
to
from
form a
Merlin that
platform in the
Gadotsi
underworld.
and Matthew
At this
had
moment,
received a lot of
Wuming
help
and the
from
rather
Wuming
reluctant
along the
Ishtar
way.
stood at
The
the
two of
edge
them
of Stonebridge
missed a
and
lot of
looked down at the
opportunities to
platform
train.
that was formed
Although
by the
this
stone
did
bridges.
make the path
There was
they
a
took less
gigantic
difficult.
humanoid creature
Gilgamesh
that was
would
covered
make up
in
for the
red
lack
fur,
of training
but had the
along
head
the way
of
in
a
his
ferocious
Uruk for
lion.
Gadotsi and
It was one of the 11
It is true
demonic
that you did
beast
not
commanders,
follow this
the
king's
lion-headed
orders.
wugger.
Now listen to this
Surrounding
king
the tall
of
wugger
Chaldea
was a group of skeletons
Gilgamesh's
with
voice
huge
suddenly
claws
became
that
louder,
didn't have legs,
which made
Their
Gadotsi
claws were as
and
big
Matthew
as the
straighten
heads
their
of these
backs.
skeletons.
It seemed
These
that they were going to be
skeletons were the
punished.
garrulous spirits.
Yes.
The
Gadotsi
garrulous
and
spirits
Matthew
emerged
responded
from
in unison.
all over the place.
You have indeed
and
made a
swarmed
certain
towards
contribution
Wugger
in
as if they had
welcoming
seen their
back the
enemy.
Uruk god.
Since these
But
garrulous
he did not
spirits
have the slightest
had no
effect
effect
on
on
stopping
and were
the
in the
demonic
underworld
beasts that
they
crossed
all
over the
floated in
northwest
the air of
mountains.
the underworld.
Therefore,
Because of
your
this,
merits cannot
these
offset
garrulous
your
spirits
faults.
were all over Wudgel's body. His head,
Siduri will
back,
arrange
legs,
a new
claws,
task for you later.
and even the mane
Now,
on his neck were
go
all
back to your
firmly
Chaldean
grasped
embassy
by the garrulous
and rest.
spirits with their giant claws.
Gadotsi,
No matter how
and
hard
Matthew,
Wudgel struggled,
who originally
he couldn't
thought
shake
that they would be
off the
severely
garrulous
punished by
spirits.
Gilgamesh.
His physical
were stunned.
attacks were
The
basically
punishment given by
useless
Gilgamesh
against the
was
garrulous
probably
spirits,
quite mild.
because they were spirits.
Is there a problem?
Every
Seeing the
time
two
the
stunned,
garrulous spirit
Gilgamesh
was torn
looked
apart
down
by
at
a
them
claw
with his scarlet eyes.
It would recover
This
in
cold
less than
and
a
harsh
second.
gaze
The
made
garrulous
Gadotsi
spirit's claws,
and Matthew come
on the
back
other
to their
hand,
senses.
were firmly
Yes,
fixed on Ajar's
no problem.
body, while
Gilgamesh
constantly
nodded
dealing
with
damage to him.
satisfaction.
Claw marks
Then looked at
appeared
Merlin
on
and
Mount
Anna.
Wudgel.
Merlin,
And traces of blood
this king does
appeared
not
on
want to
Wudgel's
comment
body,
on your dereliction of
attracting
duty.
even
You
more
will be punished the
garrulous
same
spirits to
as
swarm him.
Chaldea.
It had to
As
be
for
said
Anna,
that the demon
that's it.
commander's physique
You may
was
leave.
truly tyrannical. If it were a servant, perhaps their spirit base would have already been forced
Chapter
to retreat
9:33.
after withstanding
Yes,
so many
thank you,
garrulous spirits
King
attacks.
Gilgamesh, for your
However,
magnanimity.
Wudger was
Merlin
still as
bowed
lively
to
as
Gilgamesh with his cane,
but he didn't
even the
leave.
angry roar
Instead,
produced by
he
the
stood
garrulous
aside and
spirits
waited quietly.
was particularly
Anna
powerful.
didn't speak.
The
She
demon
just
commander's
bowed
physique
slightly
is
to Gilgamesh,
extremely strong,
then left the throne
but it is
room.
precisely
She was just a
because of
follower
this that they appeared
abducted
to
by
be
Merlin.
in a predicament.
It was only
when
because of the
facing
agreement
spirits
with Merlin
without a physical
that Anna
body.
obediently
Like a commentator,
stayed in Uruk.
Wuming
And
said
Gilgamesh
lightly,
also
and
recognized
Ishtar heard
Anna's
it clearly.
identity.
However,
Therefore, the bow to
Ishtar
Gilgamesh
didn't care about
was
it.
just for show.
But this is a demon
More
commander,
importantly,
a
compared
demon
to the
commander
throne room,
that is
which
comparable
was filled
to the
with the
Father
unique
God.
aura
The
of clay
implication was that
tablets.
only
She
those
preferred the flower
ordinary
shop
mass-produced
owned by kind
demons
old lady in
lacked the
Uruk.
means to
Not
deal
only
with
because of the
spirits.
fragrance of the
For
flower
a demon
shop,
commander,
but also
that was
because
not on
Anna
the same
felt
level
warmth
as a
in the flower
mass-produced
shop
demon
at this
commander.
time.
How could it
Matthew
only
stood
have
up
an
and
advantage
asked,
in terms of
"That
physique?
King Gilgamesh
Wudgel
is the
Henryong.
lion of the sun.
Where is Sir?
It certainly
Is he not
can't
with
be
us?
that its physique
It seemed that
is
Matthew
far beyond
was still a little
imagination.
unaccustomed
After
to
Ishtar
Wumin's
finished
name
speaking
in this singularity.
As if to reflect
Gadotsi
Ishtar's
was also
words,
concerned
Wudjil
about
finally
Wumin's
stopped using its
After
claws
all,
to deal with
only
the garrulous
Wuming
spirits.
wasn't punished or
Wudjil
ordered by
opened its
Gilgamesh.
mouth wide.
How could she rest
and a
assured?
sun-like
This
radiance
king
appeared
and
in the
Hyunryong have
underworld.
other important
In an
matters to
instant,
discuss.
The garrulous
You don't have
spirits
to
that were
ask.
attacking Wudjil
However,
were stimulated
immediately
and
afterward,
retreated.
Merlin
Some of the
leaned
garrulous
over to
spirits
Gadotsi
that were
and
particularly
Matthew
close
and whispered.
to Wudjil.
Ignoring
even
Merlin's
died
actions,
from the intense
Gilgamesh
radiance.
turned his head
In the next second,
and looked at
the
Musasobo
radiance hidden
Benkei,
in Wudjil's
who
mouth
stood aside without
turned
saying
into
a word.
flames. Also,
the instant Woodruff swung its head
Musasobo
to the
Benkei,
surroundings,
who was
the
silent
flames were like
and
rays
seemingly
that shot out
inconspicuous,
in all directions.
responded to Gilgamesh.
The fire of the sun engulfed
King
a
Gilgamesh,
large number of
Lacquer
garrulous
Musasobo
spirits,
Benkei,
and a large number of
with one
garrulous
hand on the
spirits
razor,
perished.
Musasobo
Benkei
Benkei
knelt on
although
one
the
knee
garrulous
in front of
spirits
Gilgamesh.
didn't let out any
As you can
screams
see,
due to the fact that they were
Henryong and
spirits.
others have resolved
It
the
didn't
crisis in
affect
the
Wudjil's
northwest
mood at this moment.
and returned to Europe.
Roar.
You can rest
Wudjil
assured.
let out a
Yes,
victorious
King
roar,
Gilgamesh,
and its
Musasobo
roar
Benkei
echoed throughout
looked
the
a
underworld.
little absent-minded.
Why? Aren't you going
With
to
the strength of his legs?
Now is a good opportunity
Musasobo
to get rid
Benkei
of Wudjil.
quickly
Isn't it?
returned to the Uruk
Ishtar
to
looked at
report to
Wumi.
Gilgamesh.
Although a sneak attack
However,
wasn't a good
when
thing,
Musasobo
this was
Benkei
war.
met with
In a
Gilgamesh,
war between humans
Gilgamesh
and demons,
calmly told
the true
Musasobo
essence of
Benkei
war
not to
was
worry.
to win by any
Henryong
means necessary.
and Ishtar have
Besides,
already resolved it.
demons didn't
You
have
just wait
human
here.
rights.
After
A sneak
Gilgamesh
attack would be
left
over.
such a
However,
sentence,
Wumi still
Musasobo
chose to wait and
Benkei
see.
was left
Don't
in the
worry.
throne of the god
Someone will
tower
come
by
and
Gilgamesh.
take care of this guy.
This made
Just by
Musasobo
killing a
Benkei
few
feel
garrulous
quite
spirits.
conflicted. It let out
As
a
for what he was
triumphant
conflicted about,
roar that
to be
resounded
honest,
throughout the underworld.
Musasobo Benkei
Who did it think it was?
didn't know himself.
It could only be said that
ever
this
since he
prototype
escaped
Wudjil's
from
brain
Operation
wasn't as good
Decapitation,
as the prototype
Musasobo
Elysium that
Benkei
Wumi killed.
felt a little
It didn't
lost in
understand
his heart.
whose territory
Musasobo
it was.
Benkei
This was the
feared that
territory
history
of the
would
underworld
repeat
goddess.
itself.
One of the
Although he
three
did save
goddesses
Nuwakamaru,
alliance.
the
That
underworld
was only
goddess
because
was an
Nuwakamaru
existence that was on
close to
par
him with the
as a
goddess of
subject.
magical beasts.
He couldn't watch
Demons
Nuwakamaru
of the goddess
die
of magical
such a
beasts.
close distance.
Why are you
However,
behaving so
in other words,
atrociously
if the distance
in
was
my
far,
underworld? Perhaps
why are you
Musasobo
provoking me?
Benkei,
The voice
would
of a
abandon
creator
Nuwakamaru
resounded
and
throughout
escape
the
alone.
underworld.
Just like
And
Lord
Wudjil
Haifong of Changlu,
subconsciously
who
shut
abandoned
its
the
mouth.
Minamoto Sutra.
Ishtar was
and
so
escaped.
frightened
He didn't
that
want
she
to see
trembled.
that scene and didn't want history
At the same time,
to repeat itself.
Ishtar
also understood who Wuming was referring to.
However,
when he said
he was indeed
someone
afraid
will
of
come
facing
and
the
take care of
demonic
Wudjil.
beast commander.
It sounds a little like
Regarding
your
this,
voice.
Wumi glanced at
Benkei
Ishtar,
was confused.
However, Ishtar
Gilgamesh,
rolled her
who
eyes
saw
at Wumi.
Musasobo
What nonsense are you
Benkei's
talking
confusion.
about?
This
Lost
voice
interest
clearly
in
belongs
Musasobo
to a
Benkei.
Reshkigal.
No matter
Ishtar
what,
didn't want
a
to talk
soldier
about
could only be called a
Reshkigal.
qualified
It could be
soldier
said that
if he
other
was
than
undistracted.
Wuming. Only
The
Uruk
Reshkigal
soldiers were
could
full
give
of
Ishtar a
faith in
headache.
fighting against
After
the
all,
demonic
Ireshkigal
beasts
had once
and protecting
stripped,
their families,
pierced,
and
as
killed
for
Ishtar when she was
Musasobo
in the
Benkei.
underworld.
Although
Before
Ishtar
Ishtar
could
could
recall
recall
the
the
past,
soldiers,
Ereshkigal's
his
heart
heart was
began.
not firm.
Since you
Gilgamesh
dared to behave
definitely
atrociously
wouldn't use
in
such a
my
person.
underworld,
If he gave an
prepare to
important mission
die.
to him, it would definitely ruin things in the end.
Chapter
Moreover,
925.
the risk brought by
However,
Musasobo
the words
Benkei's
that sounded like a
confusion
death
was
sentence
far more
did
than
not
that.
strike fear
At
near
present,
her.
it was just
Although
that there was
Wudjil
no
had
fuse.
subconsciously shut its
If there was a
mouth,
fuse,
it did not
the
mean
impact
that
of
it
the
was afraid.
explosion would make
Perhaps this was what the
Musasobo
saying,
Benkei
the ignorant
leave the
are
Uruk
fearless
silently, like a
roar.
walking corpse.
Perhaps Yukur's brain,
although he would
was
eventually
really not
recover
working well.
as a heroic
It actually
spirit.
roared at the
danger
majestic
brought by the
voice
demonic
in the
beast
void
was too
as if it was
dangerous.
provoking it.
The lack of
Is it
any
crazy?
combat power
Wuming,
would put the human
who could
side
understand
at
the
a
language of the
disadvantage.
monsters,
Therefore,
naturally
Gilgamesh
knew what
couldn't
Yukur was
leave.
doing.
After
Musasobo
translating
Benkei alone,
and
keeping
subtracting
Musasobo
the profanities,
Benkei,
it was
the
more or
temporary
less bring it
solution
on.
to deal
But
with
Amir
this
Yukur
unstable
actually
factor.
dared to challenge
Speaking
the
of
goddess
unstable
of the underworld
factors,
alone.
both
Ibaraki
Wuming and
boy,
Ishtar
who
knew that
escaped
Yukur would
and
die
occupied the
without a
mountain,
doubt.
was
As
also one of
expected,
them.
after
3 months
Wudjil
ago,
let out a roar,
Ibaraki boy
black and
was
gray
among the 10
stone
pillars
who
rose
carried
from the
out
ground
the
at a
beheading
regular
operation.
angles.
Gilgamesh
As if they
couldn't
dead.
help
They
but
firmly
recall the
restrained
situation at that
Wudjil's
time.
limbs.
Because the
Although the
situation
sudden
at that time
restriction
was very
gave
bad.
Wudjil a fright.
After one of the
He
demonic
did not
beast
show any
commanders,
signs of
Mushio
panic or any other
Shio,
emotions. Attacked
Wudjil
the Uruk
actually used
and
brute force
Okitasoki's
to break the
spiritual
rock
base
pillar into
collapsed
pieces.
and left.
Roar.
Gilgamesh
Yukur stomped on the
immediately
rock
planned the
pillars
beheading
until they were
operation
crushed
against the
under its
demonic
feet.
beast commander.
Then,
he
let out another
servants to
roar
form
of
an
victory.
assassination team
This guy
to
is definitely
assassinate the
done for.
demonic beast commander.
Ishtar could not
The
bear
strength
to look
of the
at the scene in
servants
front of him
only needed
to
to be able to
provoke
get close to
Ereshkigal
and kill
such a
the demonic
manner.
beast commander.
If the original
Because this was a
Yugur was
group
supposed to
of
die,
suicide squad,
then perhaps even
and
its soul would
Gilgamesh's
be shattered
suicide
by
squad
Ereshkigal.
certainly couldn't
As
let
the
go
other
of
half of
Ibaraki
Ereshkigal,
boy, and
who was
Ishtar's
still
trip to the
occupying
underworld.
Therefore,
Ishtar understood
Gilgamesh
Ereshkigal
summoned
quite
7
well.
new servants
After
early in the
Wugol
morning
let out what he thought
and let Shiro
was a victorious
Amakusa
roar,
lead the team,
but it was actually
to
a
carry out the
declaration
plan
before
to
his
kill
death. Ibaraki
more
boy.
rock pillars
Ibaraki
rose from the
boy
ground
was a super
and restrained
unstable
Wuggle's
factor.
body.
Even if he
and
didn't
limbs.
join the Suicide
However,
Squad,
after being
as a
restrained
consumable,
once again,
he couldn't be left
Woodrow
alive
was still about
and must
to
be
use his
eliminated.
brute force to
And
break
Shiro
free.
Amakusa
At that moment,
and the others,
the rock
because
pillars
Zhuge Kongming
instantly
followed
exploded
them, and were
plus the
replaced
strength
by
of the
spears
servants.
of light.
They directly
At the same
captured
time,
Ibaraki
there were
placed the rock pillars to restrain Wudjil's body after setting a curse on Ibaraki Boy's spiritual base. Ishtar frowned at the scene as if Ibaraki Boy naturally entered the suicide squad. The light spears were no carried out the beheading operation. This was probably what was just a matter of whether they looked. By the way, during the beheading operation, just as Wudjil was about to use was in the same strength as Mother had bestowed upon him to break free from the spears of light. A large number of new spears of light, even if the curse was used to threaten Ibaraki Boy's they pierced into Wudjil's flesh. It couldn't be considered causing him to cry out was fine. Ibaraki Boy was a berserker. The light spears didn't miss a single part of Yuker's body. With two rather steady to bottom. Those two people were neck, shoulders, chest, back, waist, abdomen, legs, however, knees, arms, even if there were two steady people watching over Ibaraki, and because they pierced into Ibaraki Boy, still made a waist and abdomen by using Yuker's and one of the demonic beast commanders, and he couldn't use the Scorpion Man, Kid of Blur. I didn't expect Yuker to be able to withstand this attack. From Ishtar's point of view, being pierced by these light spears in the underworld was basically because of Ibaraki Dojo's but Yuka relied on the Scorpion Man Kid of Blur to prevent all the light spears from piercing, causing Bai Yuqian to be seriously I have to say, injured. I really can't underestimate that his spirit core had been destroyed. So he decided to take Kid of Blur down with him. She finally Ibaraki Dojo, powerful Shiro Amakusa's command definitely wouldn't let him go. If she were in Wudjil's although the servants who carried out the decapitation wouldn't be able to withstand didn't think of returning to Uruk alive without any killing a few more demonic she would have been pierced in an instant. In the end, it can only be said that one of the magical beast commanders by the original had no choice but to take Ibaraki Dojo down with him. With such a powerful if it wasn't for the insurance method, it would have been able to escape from the underworld before Leshki exploding to cover for Shiro But this Yuker was like a stubborn allowing donkey. Shiro Amakusa he didn't have the slightest opportunity to escape from the demonic beast or repent. He probably wouldn't have been able to escape. He opened his mouth again. And condensed they were a suicide of the sun again. After Yuker's eyes were filled with the desire to kill, the servants who carried out the decapitation operation still want revenge had already disregarded life and death. Did he become arrogant? The reason why he didn't die time again cherished his life. Or was Yuker really that because he had to do his best to kill Wuming felt many demonic beast commanders as possible. This wasn't a problem. Everything was for the sake of humanity. It turned out that the servants were worthy of being called heroes. In the legends, it was described that Yagyu, one of the strongest swordsmen in the Jianghu era, led the magical beast to fight against the gods. And the ancestor the reason why Kinga led the magical beast was probably because the magical beasts sired by Tiamat weren't intelligent enough. However, the two of them were also the reason why the demonic beast extreme lost was probably because there was a problem with their techniques. This might be the price to pay for obtaining great power. Although the two spirit cores 11 sons are probably lacking in intelligence. They were completely defeated by the remaining demonic But then, for some reason, Fumakotaro Wuming's nose suddenly itched, who were also looked like he was about demon ninjas. This gave ninjutsu to deal with she hurriedly slapped Wuming's mouth, who was known as the Tempest. Wuming stared at Ishtar. With the help of Shiro and the meaning of "You've got guts." The three of them managed to kill stared back at her too. Don't drop the ball at this time. However, Ishtar looked at the servants were killing one by one. Dissatisfied expression. The demonic beast commanders just as Wu Ming was about to have a problem. Even with Zhuge also Kong Ming's plan, in the next second, scattered the demonic beast commanders one by one. That was several times catching them off guard. Other garrulous spirits. The servants still managed to kill the demonic beast commanders by taking them down with them. This garrulous spirit at this time, huge, the other demonic beast commanders finally slowly raised it high. So, the demonic garrulous spirit began to surround the majestic voice of a Reshki Gal, preparing to annihilate them, who granted equal death to the people at that time. Through the connection between Gilgamesh high up in the air, Gilgamesh remotely received the news at this moment several demonic beast commanders were successfully killed. If the spear of light pierced at the same time, he lost not be able to survive. No one knew what Gilgamesh was thinking. As for whether he could pierce through its skull, he was still dealing with government affairs. Didn't have the slightest confidence this time. Because Gilgamesh knew very well that the servants he sent out had no ability to break was actually the goddess of the underworld countless demonic beasts. The spear of light, even if they could in her hand, through the genuine artifact, they would still be hunted down by the toughness of a magical. There was no way they would be able to return to the North Wall. A beastly howl came Gilgamesh wouldn't deploy. It seemed that Yuker had sensed that true to support a few servants because it was likely that a large number of soldiers would be sacrificed. However,
Chapter
because the
9:26,
strength of these servants
blood
was
splattered
not enough,
all over the rock
Gilgamesh could
platform,
maintain
and
so
Ujar
many
stopped
servants
moving.
at one time.
Wooming,
If they were like
who had
Wooming,
witnessed such a cruel
the amount
scene,
of servants
did
he
not
provided
do
would be
anything.
more than enough
Ishtar,
for Gilgamesh
who did
to
move,
go to the underworld.
only felt pity
However,
for Ujar's
although
intelligence.
Gilgamesh's heart
No
was
wonder
heavy,
these demonic
he didn't
beast
regret it.
commanders have
The
not
so-called
taken
heroic
down
spirits
humans
were
even after
existences
3
that
months.
fought for the
It's
future
because of their
humanity.
intelligence.
They were
Ishtar had
existences
to
that
admit
risked
that
everything
King
for
Gilgamesh
the
was
sake of
indeed
humanity.
a virtuous
The
king.
so-called
But the
suicide
intelligence
squad
of the demonic
proved this
beast
point.
commanders was
It was
also
precisely
a major
because they
factor that
understood
affected
that they
the
would not
demonic
be able
beast
to return,
battlefront.
that the servants agreed
All right, the demonic
to
beast
form a
commanders have been
suicide
eliminated.
squad. Fortunately,
Ishtar
Gadotsi
said,
and the others
wanted to
came
leave
late.
quietly.
If they came
without
early,
alerting
perhaps they
Ereshkigal.
wouldn't have allowed
But
such a
haven't
thing
you
to
noticed?
happen.
After
We've been
all,
discovered
whether it was
long
Gadotsi
ago.
or Matthew,
Wooming looked at
they were
Ishtar
quite
in
emotional
disdain.
people.
Wooming felt
However,
that Ishtar's
it was
intelligence
precisely
was on par
because of such
with the
human
demonic
beings
beast
that the
commanders.
servants
as
rushed
expected
into
of
the
an
demonic
idiotic
beast
goddess
without hesitation.
Glancing
that
at
so?
Gadotsi
But
and Matthew,
at this point,
who continued
Ishtar
to whisper
also
to Merlin.
noticed the problem.
Gilgamesh
After
showed a puzzled
Ereshkigal's
look.
giant gorilla
After returning to his
killed
senses,
Ujar,
Gilgamesh
absorbed
looked
his soul
at
into the spear of
Musasobo
light in her
Benkei
hand.
again.
She
The
stood
fact
still
that
and
Musasobo
looked at
Benkei
Wooming
and
and
Ishtar,
Nuwakamaru.
although there
Could
were a
survive
lot
was
of
also
rocks
within
covering
Gilgamesh's
them.
expectations.
There was no doubt
saw it
that
through his
Ereshkigal
clairvoyance.
had discovered them.
Berserker
Ereshkigal
III
is the
who
mistress
teamed up with
of the
Musasobo
underworld.
Benkei.
You can say that
and
when we entered
Nuwakamaru
the underworld,
was accidentally
Ereshkigal
discovered by the
already
demonic
knew.
beast commander.
As the only god in the
Nuwakamaru
underworld,
wanted to kill the demonic beast
Ereshkigal's
commander
authority
recklessly.
was beyond
Musasobo
imagination.
Benkei had a fear
But that was
of
all.
death.
That's
But
true.
because he was unwilling
Ishtar's
to
shoulders
abandon his former
drooped
master in
helplessly,
front of him to die
and she
again.
looked
He
powerless.
resolutely took
Ereshkigal
Nuwakamaru
only spoke
and
after
fled the
Ishtar
battlefield
showed
when Darius
a powerless
III
look,
couldn't hold on
as if she
anymore.
was waiting to
They
see
successfully
Ishtar
survived
make a fool
along
of
the
herself.
Tigris River.
However,
Nuwakamaru,
mistress of the sky,
who survived,
Ishtar, I already
regained her
know why
fighting
you are
spirit.
here.
In order
The
to make up
demonic
for her
beast
failure,
Jar has been
she
killed
continued
by
to
me.
work hard,
And the
under
other demonic
Gilgamesh
beast
to
complete
Musamathu
the task
has
given
escaped
her
from
by
the underworld.
Gilgamesh.
There is nothing
Since
you want
then,
here.
Musasobo
Leave quickly.
Benkei had changed.
Wooming could not help
To put it
but
nicely,
have a trace of doubt.
he had lost
Wooming
the
also
motivation
guessed that
to continue
Ereshkigal
fighting.
might not
put it
attack
bluntly,
him, and
he
Ishtar
had become a soulless
Wooming
zombie.
did not expect
At this moment,
Ereshkigal to let him.
Musasobo
and Ishtar's
Benkei's
expression
expression
was
that.
like this.
Obviously,
Seeing this
the
scene,
other party
Gilgamesh
was a
couldn't
member
help
of the
but
three
frown.
goddesses alliance.
But this doesn't mean that this
Obviously,
king doesn't
the
need
other
to
party
set up
was a
a
goddess
stronghold
who was
hostile to
northwest.
humans.
Set off
How could she let them go
immediately
so easily
and return to the temporary
Obviously,
stronghold?
They were
in
on
the
the side of
northwest.
humans.
How could she
Rendezvous
let them
with
go
Ryder
so easily?
and wait for this king's
Damn it.
subsequent
Just
orders.
listening to Ereshkigal's arrogant tone made Ishtar,
Sure enough,
quite angry.
Gilgamesh couldn't
However,
stand such
Ishtar's
expression.
brain was
It
not
was
as
too
bad as
disgusting.
Jar's.
A hero
At that
who
moment,
left his name
Ishtar
in human
pulled Wooming's
history
arm.
should look
You
like
see,
a hero. Ereshkigal
Yes,
also
King
let us
Gilgamesh.
leave. Let's go.
However,
Musasobo Benkei replied,
Wooming was not moved,
then left the tower
because
without
Wooming
stopping.
came to the underworld
Then,
not
Gilgamesh
only
looked
to
to
eliminate
eliminate
the
the
demonic
Gadotsi
beast commander,
and Matthew, who
Wooming's
was
order
still
to
muttering
Ishtar
nonstop.
was also
What are you
very
muttering
clear.
about? Eliminate
Return to the Chaldean
demonic
embassy
beast
and
investigate the
as
underworld
soon as
goddess.
possible.
It's not
Yes,
easy to have the
yes,
opportunity
King,
to get in touch
I'll take
with
my leave
Ereshkigal.
first.
You
But
can leave
Tachika
first. And Matthew seemed to have something
Wooming's
to discuss
order
with you
to Ishtar
and Lord
to
Hyunryong.
eliminate
I
the
won't disturb
demonic
you.
beast commander
Merlin
had
finished
been
speaking,
completed and
so
left
the
by
power
himself.
from the dependence
Is
that
that so?
restricted Ishtar
Gilgamesh
from
looked
leaving
at
the
Gadotsi
underworld had
and
disappeared.
Matthew.
And
Then
Ishtar
what else do you want?
could leave
That-
the
that-
underworld now.
Gadotsi
You want to
smiled
face
awkwardly.
Ereshkigal alone?
What was there
The
to
original
discuss?
whisper
Was
Merlin
also
clearly
raised a
said that
few
he could see
decibels
Juga
because of surprise.
Kong Ming if he stayed.
Hey,
Although I don't want to
end,
admit it,
he sold her
you're the
and
strongest
Matthew
on our
out.
side, right?
Why don't we let Tachika
How can you
follow?
face one of
After
the
all,
three
she is
goddesses
Chaldea's
alliance alone?
ambassador to
What if
Europe.
something happens?
Wooming
Ishtar
suggested
lowered her
half
voice
jokingly.
as much as possible.
Some things could indeed
and leaned
involve
over
Chaldea's
Wooming's
people.
ear and neck.
Forget it.
However,
This king is in a good
the
mood
response
today.
to Ishtar,
This
was
king
Wooming's
and
palm.
Hyunryong are
Actually,
going
let an
somewhere.
idiot like you worry
If you don't
about
want to
me.
return to the
How
Chaldean embassy
embarrassing.
to rest,
Wooming's palm
you can choose to
pressed onto
follow
Ishtar's beautiful
Gadotsi
face,
and Matthews,
which could be
eyes
considered
lit
as a
up.
response
If
to
Merlin was
Ishtar's
right,
previous
they should be able to
slap
see
on his
Juga
face.
Kong Ming
Damn,
next.
I'm not
Yes,
worried
King
about
Gilgamesh.
you. I'm just
It would
worried.
be our pleasure.
If you die, my reward will go down the drain. Ishtar struggled to pull Wooming
king's hand up
Chapter
in her face.
935.
While looking for an excuse for
Gilgamesh
herself,
finished
like a
speaking,
proud
he
textbook,
walked down from the throne
helplessly
and
smiling,
walked straight to the
Wuming
door.
finally
Hurry up
persuaded
and catch
Ishtar
up.
to leave.
This king won't be
You should go
responsible
back to the
if you
surface
fall
first.
behind.
I'm a little
Let's go.
worried about the
Wuming
escaped
patted
Gadotsi
Lucy
and Matthew's shoulders.
Ereshkigal
and
would
smiled.
not lie about
Don't be
this kind of
fooled by
thing.
Gil's words.
So the other demonic
if we
beast
really don't
commander,
catch up,
Musumafu
he won't care
must
about
have
us.
escaped.
Even if it was
Looks like the
Wuming,
demonic
the
beast
result would
commander
be the same.
is not completely
Gilgamesh was a
brainless
man
like
of his
Wugger.
words. At least
Isn't
the
that
demonic
bad?
beast commander
Matthew had a new
Musumafu
understanding of kings,
would escape,
Gilgamesh's willfulness,
unlike the stubborn
but
Wugger.
Gil will definitely
end,
slow down.
Ishtar also
and pretend to wait
compromised.
for us.
I know.
He has changed
You be
from the
careful.
arrogant hero
After
king
Ishtar
to the
finished
existence,
speaking, she
sitting
summoned
on
the
the
heavenly
ship's
ship's
horse
King of
Anna.
Man. placed her
Gilgamesh
hand on the
is
horse
now
Anna,
a veritable
and
sage
Ishtar
king.
slowly rose.
Wooming praised
no matter
Gilgamesh
what,
in a disguised
since Ereshkigal
way.
is willing
Idiot,
to let
don't
us
talk
leave,
too much.
it probably
Hurry up
means that she
and catch
doesn't
up.
have any
This king
ill
won't slow
intentions
down.
towards us.
Yes.
However,
Yes.
when she said
We'll
this,
catch up.
Ishtar
Gadotsi
felt
and
awkward.
Matthew
How
ran
could
toward the exit
Ereshkigal
in a panic.
not have
Wooming
any
smiled
ill intentions
helplessly,
toward her, shrugged his
In short,
shoulders.
You
and
should be
followed.
careful with your
Just
words.
like that,
There
the
shouldn't
last
be any
person
danger.
left the throne room.
You are the god that
The
Enkidu
Enkidu throne
once
room
believed
was
in.
illuminated
Even if
by
it's
the
because of
rays of the
Enkidu who
setting
treated
sun,
Ereshkigal
making
with
it look
respect.
exceptionally beautiful.
She will still let you go.
Gilgamesh walked out of the tower.
I know,
but he didn't go
You should leave
directly to
quickly.
the main road.
I am your senior
Instead,
in terms of
he
seniority.
went around to the back
How can
of
a
the
junior
tower
instruct a
and
senior?
gently
You.
press somewhere
On the
at
other
bottom
hand,
of the tower.
don't be ambushed
A stone
by
wall
another demonic
protruded
beast commander
and
when you
slowly
pass
rose
through
like
the
a
exit
stone
that
door.
connects the
A dim
underworld to the
passage
surface.
appeared in front of
Musumafu
Gilgamesh.
must have
Without the
escaped from
slightest
the entrance to the
hesitation,
underworld,
Gilgamesh
which was the
stepped
collapsed
inside.
ground that Ishtar
However,
blasted
Gadotsi
open. It
and
was
Matthew,
impossible for it to
who
escape
followed
from other
Gilgamesh,
places.
were a little
I know.
confused.
What a hateful
They
guy.
had been in Uruk
nagging
for a
like an
while,
old man.
but it was the
So what
first
if you were
time
my
they saw
senior?
such a place.
Was it an
Ishtar
important
turned her
institution?
head and left
Although
angry.
Gadotsi
Old
and
man,
Matthew didn't recognize
Wooming
it,
subconsciously
recognized
touched
it.
his chin.
I see.
Although he looked
No
young
wonder you didn't
and was
seize
definitely
you to
much
calm me.
younger than Ishtar.
He's probably
he was someone
here.
who was on the same
Wooming
level
explained
as
as he
Ishtar's
walked behind
father,
Gadotsi,
the main god
and
of
Matthew.
Sumer.
In
And
here, the two were stunned when
in
they
short,
heard Wooming's
he would
words.
definitely take
So there was such a
advantage of
secret
Ishtar.
room in
What else do you want?
Mesopotamia.
Uruk
However,
Themriel.
this isn't
the
a
conversation
secret room.
between
How
Wooming
do I
and
explain this?
Ishtar was
Anyway,
actually being monitored
you'll
by
know when you
Ereshkigal.
go in.
Although she
Wooming
was
spread
still
his hands
speechless
and walked
towards
to the
Ishtar,
stone door.
Ereshkigal was more
By the
concerned
way,
about
this
why
is the
Wooming
passage
was
to the
looking
place
for her.
where I used to live.
Ereshkigal knew
Wooming said
that the
as he
reason
pointed to
Wooming
the
was
passage
looking for
behind the
her
stone door
was definitely
the
not
passage
as
to the
simple
place where you
as the
used to
reason
live.
that Wooming
The two
used
were
to
a little
brush off
confused.
Ishtar.
I'll explain as
Ereshkigal,
we walk.
Enkidu's
The stone
tomb
door
is
will
still there,
automatically close if we delay for too long. Wooming said as he walked
Chapter
into the
927.
passage.
Oh,
That's right. It's
Wooming
semi-automatic.
cared about nothing else
Gadotsi
but Enkidu's
sighed.
tomb.
At that moment,
According to Gilgamesh,
the stone
of this
door
world,
made a sound of
after
friction
Enkidu
and
of this
swayed
world
as it
died,
fell.
because
It looked
Enkidu
like it was
treated
about to
Ereshkigal
close.
with respect
Say,
when he was alive.
Senior,
His
the
corpse
stone
was
door
buried in
seems
the
to be
underworld
closing.
by Ereshkigal.
Matthew was
In the
shocked.
Mesopotamia
If this
of the
continued,
parallel world,
they would
that
probably be
Wooming
locked
experienced.
Senior,
Enkidu's
I'm
soul
sorry.
was
Matthew
preserved by
exclaimed as he
Wooming,
grabbed
and his
Gadotsi's
corpse
arm was given to
ran
Gilgamesh
toward the
to
stone
deal
door.
with. It was probably buried in the underworld as well.
While Matthew,
After
slow
all,
down,
regardless of which
Matthew
world
changed from
Enkidu
holding
was
Gadotsi
in,
with one
he respected
hand to
Ereshkigal.
holding Gadotsi in
Enkidu's
his
tomb.
arms.
He
The
walked
huge,
briskly to the
garrulous spirit
half-closed
that
stone door.
Ereshkigal
With inertia,
transformed and shook
Matthew
its body
held Gadotsi
and rejected
and
Wooming
slid into the
in the
half-closed stone
Why should I
door.
tell thee?
Then,
As it
the stone
spoke,
door
the
happened
huge,
to close
garrulous
completely.
spirit's skeleton
Great,
emitted
senior,
a
we're
scarlet
in.
and
Matthew
terrifying
first took a
light,
deep breath,
as if it was
then
angry.
looked at Gadotsi.
I allowed you to
in his
leave
arms.
because you
However,
only entered the
Gadotsi
underworld
stayed at the
to
moment
hunt
was
down
very
magical
similar to the
beasts
feeling
and
of
didn't
being
behave
squeezed
atrociously
by Matthew's
I haven't
chest.
even punished
She
you
looked a
for
little
the
dizzy.
crime of
Say,
exploding the
Senior,
sky of
are you
my
okay?
underworld. Matthew
However,
grabbed
Wooming
Gadotsi's
was
shoulder
not flustered at
and
all.
shook desperately.
After the gods
Gadotsi
disappeared,
immediately
the underworld
pressed
should have disappeared
Matthew's
as
hand.
well.
It's only because
fine,
of your
Matthew,
reappearance,
just a little
that
dizzy.
the underworld
If
returned.
Matthew
with you.
continued to
However,
shake, it would not
the
be as
underworld
simple
that
as
returned with
dizziness.
you
At
should
this
only
time,
be a part of
the
it.
passage that was
Hearing
dim
this,
because of the closed
the
stone
huge,
door
garrulous
suddenly
spirit
lit up.
maintained its fierce posture.
Sorry.
So it did not continue
Actually, I
with
closed the
its
stone
next
door
move.
and started.
Wooming was right.
After
If
all,
it was the underworld
it
of
was
the
a passage
past,
leading to
it
its
would have
former
spread
residence.
throughout the entire
The method of opening
Mesopotamia.
and closing
However,
was naturally
after the
in
gods
the hands of
disappeared,
Wooming.
the dragon horn on
mysterious
Wooming's
existence
head
of the
emitted a
underworld
white
also
light that
disappeared.
was not dazzling.
However,
which was
because
just enough to
Ereshkigal
illuminate the
descended as a
surroundings.
servant, as a goddess who could not leave
Gadotsi
the underworld.
and Matthew
The
both
underworld
looked at Wooming
naturally
silently,
appeared with
or
Ereshkigal.
rather,
However,
they stared at him
because it
and
was
made
an
an
accessory
ambiguous sound.
of Ereshkigal.
Wooming realized
the
that his
underworld
joke
might have
didn't
gone too
appear
far,
as widely as
and his
before.
face became serious.
You guessed correctly.
Ahem.
The underworld
I'm just
is
urging you to
indeed
hurry up.
limited to
Okay,
Kuzar City
okay, let's
and the
go.
surrounding areas.
Gil is in front.
Eleshki
We can't
Gal
delay for
admitted
too
to
long.
it.
Coincidentally,
As Wooming said,
Kuzar
he
City
turned around with
was
a
located
face
in the
full of
northwest
shame
of Uruk
and began to
It was
walk
near the
down
place
the
where
passage.
Ishtar had
Gadotsi
blown
and
up
Matthew
half
were
of the
not
plains
that
with a
angry.
relic.
So they
That was why
followed
the
Wooming
underground of
that place
in order to
was
divert their
connected to
attention.
the underworld.
Wooming began to talk about the origin of this passage.
Wooming also
When I
gave
first
an
came
answer
to the
this
Uruk,
problem.
the Uruk
If that's
was
the
still
case,
ruled
you
by
can move
King
the
Ungarbanda.
underworld. That way,
As the god who protected
the entrance
the
that was
Uruk,
blasted
I hid
open
in a
will
cave.
no longer be
I
an
basically
entrance.
walked around
It will
with
just
the
be an
dolls I
ordinary
made,
hole.
or
If it
observe
was
the
only a part of the
entire
underworld,
Uruk through the
the
statues
Reshtigul
in my
could
temple.
move it with her
This
authority.
passage leads to
Although
the
the
cave
process
where I
might
hid.
be slow and long,
Villo,
the
Senpai, why did you
Reshtigul
hide?
could do it. Matthew
Why
was
should I
quite
choose
puzzled.
to give in?
The God's
The
generation was an
gigantic,
era
garrulous
where
spirit
humans
that represented
and gods
Ereshkigal
coexisted.
was a little
It was
annoying.
reasonable to
Wasn't it
say
the same
that there was
as
no
asking
need to hide.
Ereshkigal to move
Also,
a part of the underworld
even if you wanted to
that
hide,
came with her?
why did
Wasn't
you
it the
choose
same
to hide
as
in a
asking
cave?
Ereshkigal
You were the
to
god of
show
Sumer at that
she
time,
couldn't defeat
right?
it?
This
I'm doing
sentence
this
was
for your sake,
transmitted from
Ereshkigal.
Gadatsi's wristband,
Don't forget about the
which was
monster that
Roman's
escaped.
speech in Chaldea. The reason I needed to hide was very simple. It was because I was injured at that time. As for why I hid in a cave, it was simply because I had no place to go. Although the first half of Wu Ming's sentence aroused everyone's curiosity, they could still understand it. However, the second half of the sentence attracted everyone's attention and puzzlement. No place to go. Gadatsi and Matthew did not understand what he meant. However, Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's control room, seemed to have guessed something. He looked at Leonardo da Vinci beside him in disbelief, as if asking for confirmation. The genius Leonardo da Vinci naturally understood Roman's meaning and nodded, indicating that Roman should continue. That the reason why there was no place to go, could it be that you were a foreign god? Chapter 9:36. A foreign god? Gadatsi paused for a moment. What did this mean? Doctor, are you saying that the Villo Senior is not Sumer's native god? Wu Ming was not surprised by Roman's conjecture. After all, he did not intend to hide his identity as a foreign god. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the fact that he has multiple identities in history proves that the Villo is not a simple existence. At the very least, he is not a native god. Sumer's native gods were born from faith. After the gods retreated, these gods also disappeared. Only Wu Ming, who was not a native god, could survive in other eras. Of course, it was only a possibility that he could survive in other eras. However, Wu Ming had left his shadow in many places in history. Cyrus, Soderic, Villo Cyrus Ed, Hyunryong. Even if he was a foreign god, once he accepted the natives' faith, it would still have a serious impact after the gods disappeared. However, Wu Ming acted as if nothing had happened and left traces in human history. Roman guessed that Wu Ming's traces probably existed in the modern era as well. It was just that they had not been discovered. After all, Wu Ming had personally admitted that he was not dead. That's right. Roman's analysis is correct. I'm actually a foreign god. Wu Ming admitted it naturally. You really are a foreign god. Gadatsi thought it was a joke. Because I protected the Uruk, the humans of the Uruk, and even Mesopotamia classified me as a Sumer god. Even so, the disappearance of the gods will not have much impact on me. When Wu Ming's power was insufficient in the past, he was restricted when he used his real body in the modern era. He had to be careful. However, now, Wu Ming did not have to be careful at all. This was because Wu Ming's status had reached the limit of the world. The world could no longer restrict Wu Ming. After all, Wu Ming was one step away from adulthood. However, this step could no longer rely on the accumulation of time. He had to find another way. Will Tachika hate me because I am a foreign god? Wu Ming suddenly turned around and looked at Gadatsi. However, this immediately received a response from Gudazi. How is that possible? Assassin is assassin. Is she a god or a human? Or does she have anything to do with a foreign god or a local god? Anyway, I've always liked assassin. Gadatsi had a baffled look on his face. However, Gadatsi's words stunned the innocent Matthew. His face couldn't help but blush. Senior, are you confessing to Senior Villo? Matthew asked embarrassedly. Wu Ming was also stunned. He felt that Gadatsi's love for him was not the kind of love between a man and a woman. It was more like the love between a brother and a sister. It's not a confession. If I have to say it, I feel that assassin is like a brother to me. Simply put, it's the love between a brother and a sister. Gadatsi also explained in a serious tone. Sure enough, Tachika, you think so too. Wu Ming sighed in relief. If he treated Gadatsi as a sister, and Gadatsi treated him as a love interest, wouldn't it be strange? Of course. Anyway, I don't know why, but I always feel close to Assassin. This was the same for Wu Ming. Although the two had only met a few times, Ever since Wuming met Gadatsi for the first time, he felt that Gadatsi was like a sister to him. He wanted to take care of her. Although Wuming didn't understand the reason, it didn't hinder the feelings between Wuming and Gadatsi. Gadatsi said with a smile. Then, she threw herself into Wuming's arms. The space in this passage isn't that big. Why are you making a fuss? Can't you be more obedient? Wuming's face was full of helplessness. Gadatsi responded to Wuming with a proud laugh. I won't. Seeing this scene, Matthew said with a blank face. Doctor, I'm a bit confused. As a follower and junior who accompanied Gadatsi all the way, Matthew could be said to be the one who understood Gadatsi the most. Senior Varen and Senior Varen aren't siblings, and their feelings for each other are beyond the brotherly love I've seen, but the way they look at each other doesn't seem to be the love between a man and a woman. I don't quite understand this kind of feeling. However, the doctor didn't respond. Doctor? Chaldea had to speak through Gadatsi's bracelet, but Chaldea didn't need to be close to receive the sound. It was precisely because of this that Gadatsi also realized that something was wrong. After leaving Wuming's arms, Gadatsi called Chaldea. Doctor? Doctor? However, there was still no response. Is the signal interfered again? Gadatsi couldn't help but guess. After all, the signal between the bracelet and Chaldea was often easily interfered with. This was also a drawback that Chaldea couldn't eliminate. It shouldn't be. Although my cave does have a barrier, it can't be interfered with before I get close. Wuming also made a judgment. However, at this moment, Gadatsi's bracelet finally made a sound, but it was Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Yes, this is your genius Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Student Romani has died in battle, and he was muttering, it's more than brotherly love, but it's not love between a man and a woman. I don't understand such feelings. Damn it, I'm such a loser without family, friends, and lovers. Oh, by the way, Romani was crying. As a genius, Leonardo da Vinci could imitate him, but for the sake of this genius image, I refused. So the doctor is such a loser. Gadatsi couldn't help but laugh dryly. I thought the doctor was married. Matthew, who had seen Roman wearing a ring, didn't know what to say. Roman, I won't talk about you for now, but Tachika, Matthew, Leonardo da Vinci, and the other surviving members of Chaldea, aren't they all your friends and family? You've been through life and death together, and you've been working hard to save the world. This is a situation where one wrong move will cause you to lose the whole game. Isn't that enough to prove this relationship? Although the saying, a friend in need is a friend indeed, seemed a little cliché, the meaning it expressed was not a cliché. No matter when, a friend in need could indeed reveal a friend in need, and Chaldea was currently doing so. After Wuming said this, Gadatsi, Matthew, and the rest of Chaldea fell into silence. Chapter 9:37. What's wrong? Wuming saw that everyone was silent, and for a moment, he was puzzled. Did he say something wrong? Villo Senpai. You're right. Matthew showed a relieved smile. That's right. Everyone worked together to get through so many singularities. Without everyone, Matthew and I definitely wouldn't be able to do it, Gadatsi also said. It seems that even a genius like me can be slow. It seemed that Wuming was better than Leonardo da Vinci in some aspect, and Leonardo da Vinci's voice sounded quite distressed. And Chaldea's staff also started to discuss because of this sentence. Yes, because I've been nervous all this time. I've forgotten that we're partners who have gone through so many difficulties together. Indeed, although we're facing a world crisis, the relationship between everyone has become more intimate. That's right, to be able to go through the end of the world with everyone, whether we succeed or not. We've already become friends. What nonsense are you talking about? We'll definitely succeed. That's right, Fujimaru and Gillett have gone through so many singularities. We'll definitely succeed. But we can't slack off. Only by doing our job can we be worthy of Fujimaru and Gillett's efforts. Oh. Everyone exchanged words one after another, and although they were chatting happily, the staff still didn't forget their work at hand, and even their morale rose for some reason. For a time, Chaldea's control room was still operating normally, but no matter how one looked at it, it was livelier, more lively, and more hopeful than before. And Roman, who was squatting and crying on the side, also recovered and walked to Leonardo da Vinci's side. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci also took the initiative to let Roman sit down. After adjusting his mentality, Roman spoke. "Oh, I can only say that you're worthy of being a historical hero and Lord God. You're more open-minded than us humans. Because of the impact of the burning of humanity, our nerves are indeed a little tense in the end." Roman let out a long sigh and thanked Wu Ming sincerely. "Thank you." Whether it was Leonardo da Vinci, Gadazzi, or Matthew, all of them could tell that Roman was very grateful to Wu Ming. "Although it's not as serious as you make it out to be, you guys have indeed neglected it. Of course, Roman, if I had met you earlier, I think we would have definitely become friends. If that was the case, it would be hard to say if the current Roman would really have a fever." Whether or not Wu Ming could change the past Roman was another matter altogether. "I think you can probably change me." For some reason, Roman seemed to be recalling something and fell into deep thought. "Forget it. Let's talk about these things later. We have to hurry up and catch up with Gil. Don't let him wait too long." Even if he's not called a wise king, the king's temper is also erratic. Wu Ming's words surprised Gadazzi and Matthew. That's true." Matthew nodded. Yes, let's go quickly. I don't want to experience any more tests." It seems that Gadazzi's memory of the trial given by Gilgamesh was still fresh in her mind. Even if Gadazzi's view of the current Gilgamesh had changed, there was still a fear of Gilgamesh in her heart. Sure enough, when Gadazzi, Wu Ming, and Matthew caught up with Gilgamesh, Gadazzi's throat moved and a nervous look appeared on her face. Gilgamesh, who was standing steadily in the middle of the passage with his back facing Wu Ming's trio, crossed his arms in front of his chest and only spoke when he heard the movements of Wu Ming's trio. "Idiot. Too slow. This king is still waiting for you." I'm sorry, King Gilgamesh." Gadazzi and Matthew were obviously frightened, but Wu Ming seemed to have seen through something, and a teasing smile appeared on his face. "Ahem. Gil, if I remember correctly, there should be a fork in the road ahead." Although it was a very normal sentence, Wu Ming's tone gave people the feeling that he was teasing Gilgamesh. However, the response to Wu Ming was Gilgamesh's arrogant voice. "Oomph. You don't have to deliberately provoke this king. Even if this king will work himself to death, he will not be senile. It's just that our destination this time is not the cave where you are hiding, but another place. This king is afraid that you will take Fumaru and the others the wrong way, so he specially waited for you here." Yes, this road was not a one-way road. There would be many forks in the road ahead. The extra roads were deliberately made by Wu Ming. In short, in order to make the right way to the cave where he was hiding not easily discovered, it was specially made under the Divine Tower, but it was useless. How could people who had the ability to find the stone door and come and be confused by these forks? If they could come in, if they were instructed by Wu Ming, they would naturally not go the wrong way. And if they came in with their own ability, it meant that the other party was a capable person, and naturally, they would not go the wrong way. Not to mention those who couldn't come in, these forks had no effect on them since they couldn't even come in. As for those who came in by mistake, no one would come in by mistake. Wu Ming would not make such a typical mistake. The stone door itself was set by Wu Ming to disperse the loon. Ordinary people couldn't even get close to it, let alone open the mechanism to enter the passage by chance. Therefore, these forks became superfluous. When these forks were made, the young Gilgamesh also persuaded Wu Ming not to do these useless things. But according to Wu Ming's words, there must be forks in the tunnel, and other people's secret passages are like this. In the end, Gilgamesh couldn't resist Wu Ming, so he let Wu Ming complete the passage mixed with forks. As a result, this place was like a maze. Regardless of whether he got lost or not, he was definitely annoyed. Wu Ming didn't expect Gilgamesh to forget the way. After all, Gilgamesh must have been here in the past 3 months. Just like Gilgamesh said, he wouldn't forget the way even if he worked himself to death. Wu Ming teased Gilgamesh mainly to liven up the atmosphere, so that Gadotsi and Matthew wouldn't be so nervous. After this king's Uruk was attacked by the magical beast last time, this king accidentally discovered an extra passage that you set up underground. So, this king took advantage of the situation and dug a new space at the end of this passage to meet the requirements of this king's military advisor. Chapter 9:38. Gilgamesh said as he walked. Gilgamesh walked in front, illuminated by the light emitted by the dragon horn headdress on Wuming's head. His long shadow spread out on the special stone floor in front of him, creating a clear shadow. In fact, Gilgamesh could see clearly in the dark passage even if there was no light, and so could Wuming, so there was no light in this passage. Today, because Gadotsi and Matthew followed, Wuming asked Kalas to light up the passage. He had to say that Kalas was really omnipotent in terms of support. Wuming didn't know whether Matthew could see clearly, but Wuming knew that Gadotsi, as an ordinary person, needed light. Without delay, Wuming followed Gilgamesh, and then asked Gilgamesh, "Speaking of which, your military counselor is a pseudo-follower. Is his personality Zhuge, Kong Ming, or the physical personality? Or is it like Ishtar's 3-7? Taking this opportunity, he could ask Gilgamesh the truth, and Gadotsi and Matthew were also quite interested in this. "Oh, it seems that you have seen this king's military counselor before. We met him in Winterwood in Rome, but at that time, one was Zhuge Kong Ming, and the other was the physical personality Ermero II. Without Wuming, Gadotsi and Matthew met Ermero II, who acted as a king's military counselor, when they followed the fifth emperor of Rome, Nero, to fight against the enemy. This king's military counselor is Zhuge Kong Ming, not the physical personality Ermero II you have seen." After Gilgamesh finished answering, Wuming spoke again. "So what does this Zhuge Kong Ming need? Is it an independent secret space? Then the cave I used to hide in is not impossible. Why spend the effort to build another one?" Wuming was quite puzzled. He needs an enclosed space where no one could disturb him to make his props, and your cave has a ventilation, so this king created such a space for him. Probably because he died in a tent with airflow when he was alive, Zhuge Kong Ming, who became a heroic spirit, was quite concerned about the enclosed space without airflow, especially the kind of enclosed space underground, which made Zhuge Kong Ming quite satisfied. Furthermore, the cave you once hid in belongs to you. This king will forever guard it for you. This king will not allow anyone to use it. This point is off the table. On this point, Gilgamesh still has his own insistence. Wuming naturally knew what Gilgamesh cared about. For Gilgamesh, the place where Wuming lived probably has a special meaning to Gilgamesh. Speaking of which, what's at the end of this path? It's just a dead end. There's nothing. Because of this, Gilgamesh built a new secret room at the end of this path. Is your memory getting bad because of your age? How can you forget something you did? Gilgamesh couldn't help but criticize Wuming. There's nothing I can do about it. I was just playing with it back then. Wuming turned his head to the side awkwardly. Speaking of which, what's at the end of the other paths? Are they also dead ends? Gadotsi was suddenly curious. They're all dead ends. Gilgamesh very simply and crudely replied. Indeed, Gil is right. They're all dead ends. However, Wu Ming added in his heart, as if he was complaining. It was indeed a dead end. Other than the dead ends of the other paths, there were all kinds of runes, such as cursed flames, thunderbolts, and so on. Furthermore, they were all so dangerous that one would die if they were not careful. Basically, it was the kind of dead end that made it impossible to survive. Looking at Gadotsi's sudden realization, Wuming was sure that the dead end imagined by Gadotsi and the dead end mentioned by Gilgamesh were definitely not the same thing. Castor needs a magic workshop to make items. Mr. Kongming probably needs to build his own workshop, so he asked King Gilgamesh to help him build it. Matthew suddenly interjected. Exactly. Gilgamesh praised Matthew, which made Matthew a little proud. However, Wuming was not like Matthew who didn't know anything. Although Castor needs a magic workshop, the magic cast by Chinese heroes should be fundamentally different from the magic cast by other regions. Even if there is no workshop, Chinese servants can still exert their power. Although Wu Ming didn't know the meaning, Wu Ming knew that the Chinese caster was not like the magicians in other regions. Not only the method and name were different, but the essence was also different from the magic base used by other magicians. In other words, Chinese magicians didn't use magic base. Not to mention the Kanagi magicians for the time being. The magicians, after the Kanagi magicians, needed magic base to use magic. Although it seemed that magicians could easily perform magic by chanting a spell or drawing a circle, but magicians could only perform magic by connecting to the magic base of this world. The magic base could be imagined as a collection of a series of knowledge, ideas, and so on, and it basically existed in the land. Of course, if you think about Christianity, a world-famous religion, its magic base might be spread all over the world. Just like the Lune Rune, there was also a magic base when it was used. When Wu Ming learned the Lune Rune, he was a Kanagi, and Wu Ming was a mutant, so the magic base naturally couldn't restrict him. So Wu Ming only knew a little about it and didn't go too deep. The magic circuit was not only used to provide magical power, but it was also used to connect to the magic base. This was the most basic truth in the magic world, and basically, every magician would know it. However, Wu Ming, who glanced at Gadotsi, silently took back his sentence at this moment. He had to say that Gadotsi was really too bad as a magician, and in terms of temperament, Gadotsi was not suitable to be a magician at all. However, it was exactly because of Gadotsi's temperament that he could keep making connections with the clones of the heroic spirits who had unique personalities and unusual tempers, the servants. In short, although Wu Ming didn't have a deep understanding of these, Wu Ming knew that the magic used by the Chinese magicians was very different from the magic used in other places, so Wu Ming pointed out that Zhuge Kongming didn't need a magic workshop. Moreover, as the military advisor on the battlefield, Zhuge Kongming must have spent most of his time marching and fighting. Since that's the case, it's not surprising that he has a way to replace the workshop. Now that the magical beasts are wreaking havoc, I don't think that the military advisor needs a special workshop to make items. Wu Ming's eyes flashed with the light of speculation, although he looked at Gilgamesh. I'm afraid, Gil, you gave him some task. Chapter 9:39. What task was given? Looking at each other, Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but repeat. As expected of this king's teacher, Uruk Hyunryong, that's right. As you said, this king's military counselor doesn't need a special workshop. The reason why the military counselor needs a workshop is indeed because this king gave Zhuge Kongming a difficult task. Gilgamesh stopped abruptly as he finished speaking. We're here. Huh? So fast. Matthew showed a look of disbelief. They just walked for a short while. How did they arrive? With such a short distance, if they were on the ground, it was almost the market near the Holy Tower in Uruk City. No, Matthew, since you stepped into this fork, your speed has increased several times, but you didn't notice it. Roman saw it clearly through the instrument in Chaldea. The figures of Gadotsi and the others seemed to be moving forward at a high speed. It can be said that they were completely out of Uruk City. According to the instrument, your current position is somewhere near the north wall? Roman shouted in disbelief. How is that possible? We only walked a few steps? Gadotsi was also surprised. Is the instrument broken? What's going on? So annoying. Roman checked the instrument. But King Gilgamesh also said that we have arrived. Maybe we're really near the north wall. Matthew raised a small hand and expressed his opinion. So that's how it is. Roman stopped checking the equipment and nodded. I think it's probably some kind of magic trick with special effects set up in this underground passage. Since this was Kanzaki's underground labyrinth-like tunnel, the entire tunnel was filled with mana. That was why Roman didn't pay much attention to this mana. Now that he thought about it, it was highly likely that the mana was being emitted by some sort of special magic spell. At the very least, it was related. Roman's judgment is correct. This passage has an acceleration effect. Wu Ming gave the final answer. However, this was not set by Wu Ming, it was probably added by Gilgamesh later. Of course, don't forget that this king is now a magician. It's natural for him to use magic to make the passage more convenient. This place was quite a distance away from Uruk. If they were to rely on walking, they would not be able to reach their destination in a short period of time. Only by applying the acceleration effect to the entire passage could they reach their destination in such a short period of time. It only takes such a short time to go from Uruk to the North Wall. This is a great advantage for the North Wall. Matthew realized the problem. In a sense, this passage shortened the distance between the North Wall and Uruk to the extreme. In this way, whether it was support, marching, retreating, or other things, it could be done easily. This passage originally led to the north, and its end was near the North Wall. In the beginning, when Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, one of the commanders of the demonic beasts, led the demonic beasts to sneak into the Uruk from underground, they also found this passage by accident and smoothly arrived near the Uruk. If not for this, the demonic beasts wouldn't have reached the Uruk that night. However, there were two sides to everything. Since the demonic beasts could use this passage to reach the Uruk, why couldn't humans use it? Gilgamesh simply transformed the end of the passage into Zhuge Kong Ming's magic workshop, which was connected to the barracks in the North Wall. If there were no limitations, it would indeed be more convenient to support the North Wall from Uruk. The limitation was the narrowness of the passage. Kalas analyzed it. Wu Ming put his hand on the wall and passed the magic to Kalas to achieve the effect of sampling. Master, the space here is too narrow. The magic attached to it can only work on a dozen people at most. If more people are added, I'm afraid it will exceed the capacity of the acceleration magic, and the acceleration will be scrapped. Kalas' cold voice came from Wu Ming's head. It could be said that it scared Gadatsi and Matthew. Senior Villo's horn. Matthew was stunned. Talk. Gadatsi raised her finger and pointed at Wu Ming's head in surprise. By the way, Kalas didn't talk to you, but you have seen Kalas before. Wu Ming's words made Gadatsi fall into deep thought. Have we seen her before? In addition to this peculiarity, Gadatsi couldn't remember when Wu Ming had a horn on his head. When we first met, the black hat I was wearing was actually another form of Kalas. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Gadatsi suddenly recalled the first time she and Wu Ming met. That memory was still fresh in Gadatsi's mind. So it's that black hat. Gadatsi suddenly shouted, as if she had just woken up from a dream. Senpai, you are too rude. Mashu was a little embarrassed as she poked Gadatsi. Gadatsi, who realized that she was indeed a little rude, scratched the back of her head. Hey, I'm sorry. However, Kalas didn't pay attention to Gadatsi and Matthew at all. It was precisely because Kalas didn't talk to anyone other than Wu Ming that Gadatsi and Matthew didn't remember Kalas. Oh, it turned out to be a high-level magic costume. Where did you get this? This king doesn't have any impression of it. Gilgamesh saw the nature of Kalas at a glance. When he saw the dragon horn on Wu Ming's head, Gilgamesh knew that it was a magic costume, but Gilgamesh didn't expect Wu Ming's magic costume to be so intelligent. It was definitely a high-level magic costume. Kalas was made by the second magician in the future. Although it is a simple auxiliary magic costume, Kalas is almost omnipotent except for combat. What? The second magician made it? This time, it was Roman's turn to be surprised. Sure enough, Roman should have thought of this earlier. An attire that was similar to an artificial intelligence and could instantly analyze the magic within the passage was undoubtedly the highest level of magic attire. Perhaps only an existence at the level of a mage would be able to create something like this. However, before Roman could recover from his shock, a voice that was supposed to be very pleasant to the ear emitted a strong fighting spirit at this moment. Oh, I seem to have heard someone mention omnipotence. Chapter 940. It's Leonardo da Vinci's voice. However, Matthew's words were full of worry. After all, although Leonardo da Vinci's voice was still pleasant to the ears, when Leonardo da Vinci's voice entered Matthew's ears, Matthew had a bad feeling. It's probably Leonardo da Vinci's jealousy again. It's not the first time. Gadatsi whispered to Matthew. After spending so many days together from winter wood to Mesopotamia, Gadazzi understood Leonardo da Vinci. Whenever other people involved Leonardo da Vinci's expertise, Leonardo da Vinci would become unusually unique. For example, Wu Ming's omnipotence just now. For Leonardo da Vinci, who had the title of omnipotent, this could be said to be a blatant provocation, and it was a top-notch provocation. Leonardo da Vinci was talented in painting, music, sculpting, mathematics, astronomy, geometry, biology, physics, engineering, invention of props, creation of weapons, and many other fields. Furthermore, he had outstanding achievements in all of them. Furthermore, such an omnipotent person had quite a bit of talent in magic as well. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of counterfeiting, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real product. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of art, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real artist. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of invention and construction, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real inventor. Although it seemed like he was going to use violence, Leonardo da Vinci was against violence. However, if he accidentally used violence, Leonardo da Vinci would not reflect on it. Wu Ming's words just now included all these aspects, which could be said to be an unprecedented provocation for Leonardo da Vinci. Omnipotence. This word could be said to be synonymous with Leonardo da Vinci. Not only Leonardo da Vinci himself, but also many scholars, and followers who knew Leonardo da Vinci in history recognized him. The personnel of Chaldea often sighed with emotion about Leonardo da Vinci's omnipotence, saying that other existences were omnipotence in front of such a person. Wasn't that a provocation to Leonardo da Vinci? Although Wu Ming didn't mean it, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. It could only be said that this really confirmed Leonardo da Vinci's words. Be careful of artist followers, because artist followers were often some lunatics. Leonardo da Vinci? Calm down, please. The magic you emit has already affected the safety of the individual of our opposing incense, has been completely detected. Communication is also interfered with. Please restrain yourself. Indeed, Wu Ming's side did start to become noisy when he heard Chaldea's words. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss seems to be serious. It's over. I hope the doctor can stop Leonardo da Vinci from kissing. Matthew and Gadazzi began to pray meaninglessly. Wu Ming couldn't help but feel nervous at this moment. It was reasonable to say that he didn't have to be afraid of Leonardo da Vinci at all, but strangely, at this moment, Wu Ming didn't know why he felt a trace of fear. This was probably the uniqueness of artist followers, to be able to make Wu Ming feel afraid. However, in the next second, the sound of something breaking suddenly came from Gadazzi's bracelet. Beep! That was the sound of the communication being cut off. The communication was cut off? Gadazzi and Matthew were curious. It shouldn't be that weak, right? Could it be that Roman did something? However, Wu Ming looked at Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's claw-gloved hand was still pointing at Gadazzi's direction. There was a trace of magic on the tip of the claw-glove's index finger. Apparently, Gilgamesh helped to cut off the communication between Chaldea and this side. This king just felt that the genius over at Chaldea's side is a little too noisy, and we are about to enter another magician's workshop. If the other party asks, just use this as an excuse. Most magicians' workshops did have the function of blocking other magic methods. This made Gadazzi and Matthew, who knew Leonardo da Vinci, brighten up when they heard Gilgamesh's words. As expected of King Gilgamesh, who can deal with so many desperate government affairs, Gadazzi thought of Gilgamesh's efficiency in dealing with government affairs not long ago. No matter what, he could easily get things done. As expected of King Gilgamesh, he actually found a solution so easily. Matthew looked at Gilgamesh with admiration. As long as Leonardo da Vinci calmed down and explained the reason with a proper reason, this matter would basically be over. A calm Leonardo da Vinci was a very reliable and approachable follower. You too, praise this king to your heart's content. Ha ha. Probably satisfied that he solved the upcoming disaster in an instant, Gilgamesh laughed heartily. Yes, King Gilgamesh. As if encouraged, Gadotsi and Matthew let out an amazing shout. Then Wu Ming made a little joke. Hyunryong, this king solved this problem for you. You should thank this king. Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming happily. However, how could Wu Ming let Gilgamesh succeed? This is underground. I don't dare to shout. What if it collapses? This scared Gadotsi and Matthew, and they immediately shut their mouths. However, Gilgamesh still had a way to crack Wu Ming's trick. Oomph. This place has been magically processed. How can it collapse because of a mere shout? It's simply an alarmist. Immediately afterward, Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming, or rather, he glared at Wu Ming. What's more, this is a shout of praise for this king. How can it stop? Stupid. As if he was dissatisfied with Wu Ming for causing Gadotsi and Matthew's voices to disappear, he burst out swearing. Yes, yes, my king, but shouldn't we get down to business? Wu Ming smiled helplessly at Gilgamesh. What are they here for? Your remonstrance is reasonable. This king won't fuss over your mistake. Let's go. This strategist's workshop is just a turn ahead. Gilgamesh said as he led the way. Really? Wu Ming shook his head helplessly, then followed Gilgamesh. At this moment, Wu Ming missed the past. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.